I would like to welcome you all and thank everyone for joining us today. My name is Gökhan Kilit. I'm Deputy Secretary General of Economic Development Foundation. Let me recall very quickly some technical tips. I want to inform you that we have simultaneous translation service during the webinar, English to Turkish and Turkish to English. You can see the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen. Herkese merhaba. İktisadi Kalkınma Vakfı ve İltica ve Göç Araştırmaları.
We would like to welcome everyone.
İGAM Akademi işbirliğinde düzenlenen.
We'd like to welcome you all to the webinar titled Fifth Year of the Turkey-EU Deal, Experiences and Predictions. This is co-organized by İKV Economic Development Foundation and by İGAM Research Center for Asylum and Migration Studies. We will have interpretation, simultaneous interpretation at the right bottom of the screen. For you to be able to hear in English, please make sure you click and you choose English language from the choice, and please choose and click on Korean for you to be able to follow in Turkish, because we have distinguished speakers from abroad countries, and during the summit, the EU and Turkey, this is the fifth year of the Turkey-EU deal experience. And this deal, so this is a very timely organization, and this was first initiated as a deal. However, it certainly is very important, and it also includes some of the steps in order to improve the Turkey and EU relations. It doesn't only cover the migrations. We have very distinguished speakers, and we will be speaking and addressing the present, the past, present, and future of our deal. And we have very distinguished speakers, and we also have another important, we're marking March 18th, and we're also celebrating the Çanakkale Dardanelles Victory and Martyrs Day. We commemorate our founder of our Republic of Turkey, Mustafa Kemal Atatürk. And now, first of all, I would like to give the floor to Ayhan ZEYTİNOİLLU as the İKB President, Vice President of TOBB. Thank you so much. Esteemed Minister, Deputy Minister, and esteemed Head of Department of Political Affairs of the EU.
Hepinizi webinarımıza katıldığınız için hepinize hoş
We'd like to welcome you all to our webinar. I'd like to also extend my gratitude for your cordial presence here with us today. And I also would like to
tüm şehitlerimizi rahmetle ve minnetle anıyorum.
The 106th anniversary of our Çanakkale Victory Martyrs Day. 5 years ago from today, on March 8th, 2016, Turkey and EU adopted a joint declaration and statement. And this declaration was largely aimed at controlling the transit of Syrian refugees to EU. However, it was not limited to this subject only. In the statement consisting of 9 articles, it was named as EU-Turkey deal addressed. It also addressed topics such as not only the cooperation on refugee issues, but revitalizing membership negotiations, updating the custom unions, visa liberalization for Turkish citizens, voluntary admissions of refugees by EU countries, and there were other articles to improve the humanitarian situation in Syria. However, the following days to come, no progress was made on the articles other than the topic of refugee cooperation. And the last chapter in the membership negotiation was financial and budgetary provisions, opened on June 30th, 2016. And a new chapter has not yet been opened since then. And in the EU Council outcomes of 26th June 2018, the following were stated: Turkey is moving away from the EU, and that the new chapters were not to be considered to be opened. And it was stated that it was not considered to work on the modernization of the customs union. It was also fulfilled. It has fulfilled 65 of the 72 of Turkey's visa criteria were identified. Although 66 criteria have been fulfilled since then, the process could not be completed. Citizen on application of Schengen visa has exceeded 500 million euros in the last 10 years. And relations have gone from bad to worse, despite these political problems. One of the most effective aspects of relations has been the issue of refugee cooperation. In this context, 3+3 billion euros were allocated in 2 tranches. It's been announced that more than 4 billion of this has been used so far, and the entire amount has been contracted. About 41 projects were supported, and Turkey has become the country to host the largest number of asylum seekers, refugees in the world. We're hosting over 4 million refugees and asylum seekers. Our workers, our laborers are sharing their bread with their Syrian brothers and sisters. Turkey, by doing so, has taken off a huge burden of and from the EU. For instance, Germany has been spending 30,000 euro per capita per Syrian refugees. If you can take this as a basis, you can probably see the amount, but this has not reflected itself on the other aspects of the relation. Turkey and EU relations have grown into a new direction route based more on interests other than values. Now, while we are addressing Turkey and EU refugee cooperation and its future, it's really important to address it in a broader framework and context covering EU-Turkey relations. Today, we have esteemed Mr. Minister, and we have very distinguished speakers with us to address the aspects of EU and Turkey deal, the future of the refugees cooperation. I wouldn't like to take much time of yours. I'd like to thank everyone, and I wish us all a very successful webinar. I'd like to now give the floor to Metin ÇORABATIR. He's the president of Research Center for Asylum and Migration Studies. Esteemed Minister and esteemed President of İGAM ZEYTİNOİDLU.
Çok değerli izleyicilerimiz, bu konferansa hoş geldiniz.
We would like to welcome you all to this webinar. First of all, I'd like to begin by wishing the best of luck with the new deal. As you know, this deal has come to an end, and the last coin will be serving to the other deeds to be completed as of 2024. And I'm sure there are some other negotiations are continuing, and I'm sure this will be explained by our Deputy Minister, Mr. Ambassador. This means that this might be extended. This means that this goes to show that there will be a new deal. That's why I wanted to start my words like this. As you know, 5 years ago, this deal was signed under the atmosphere of almost like a panic. There were painful days. Thousands of people were trying to sail and cross the sea by means of holding to a tire of a truck, perhaps. And these were such painful days. And today, we're marking the 5th year and anniversary of the deal. There are many other webinars and seminars addressing this anniversary. And foreign press members are calling us to receive our comments. So there is this very deep interest to the importance of this, and it goes to show how important this is, not only for Turkey, but also for EU. It has not lost its importance at all. And this deal, once it was effective, of course, it had some gaps because it was prepared in such a hurry. It has taken many human rights bases, and many human rights institutions have voiced their concerns. And for the returns and to Turkey, there were some questions about whether there would be a fast and quite quick returns being made to Turkey. And Turkey traditionally is quite loyal to the principle of not sending back, which is the principle of non-refoulement. So Turkey has been adhering and by Article 33. And the first NGO, it was quite a very young institution, our panelists. Ms. Eva HORELOVA, I'm sure she will be very kindly sharing with us the most updated status and maybe the figures as well. But what I'd like to very briefly say about the asylum part of this is in the last 5 years, in comparison to how we compare it to the first years, there's been an improvement because we've been benefiting from the FRIT a lot and stabilization of the refugees has been very important, and we've been benefiting from the ESSN. And this has certainly increased the probability of the refugees to benefit from the protections, and the EU-funded projects and the other projects have been focusing on protection, which is of vital importance and critical importance. And all these are the success stories, the figures and other numerical indicators. The future prospects, I'm sure that there will be a new deal on the horizon.
Yunanistan'dan Türkiye geri gönderilenlerin
other aspects that are not yet known well. These need to be taken into account as well. For instance, we couldn't get into the details of some of the statuses. There is no research on this. And like, for instance, some other resettlement of the refugees from Turkey to Germany or to other countries. I don't think there is a research made into the factors and dynamics of this. And these should be taken into account in the making of the new deal. And certainly monetary and budget support should certainly continue. But other than that, in the deal or the convention of 1951 and the geographic limitation, and in the new deal, this needs to be also emphasized, and negotiations on this should be also made, and Turkey should be supported in that. And during this process, while we're doing this, support should continue. And the refugees
Kemal Kireççi hocamın da bu konuda bir
should be integrated to the economy of the EU. And there's a research made, for instance, what they produce and manufacture here in Turkey, it should be marketable to EU so that they can increase their income, so that they can have a resource. And once they go back to their country, it's important for them to have a resource and a budget income. They place great importance to the education of their children, and they'd like to come to. So the new support schemes should also be focusing on the education aspect as well. And if they return back to their home, these refugees in Turkey, and these economic ties that they have built while they were at the status of refugees, and the path that they will cover as they are holding the status of refugee, these will positively contribute to the rebuilding of Syria. And the human rights action plan also foresees some improvement on this aspect as well. And in the negotiations between Turkey and EU, this needs to be one of the other points. And the global refugee deal also has principles. And there's this commitment to the third countries. This needs to be, the focus on this needs to remain. And without further ado, I'd like to thank all our listeners. I wish us all a very fruitful webinar. Thank you.
Şimdi Açış Konuşmaları bölümümüzün son konuşmacısı. Avrupa Birliği Türkiye.
And the last speaker of our opening remarks is Ms. Eva HORELOVA from the EU delegation to Turkey, and she's the head of the political affairs section of the EU delegation to Turkey. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good
Çok teşekkür ediyorum.
I would also like to give you the greetings from Ambassador Maya Landrut, who's the head of the European Union delegation. He couldn't be with you today because he's actually visiting Hatay province. And this also shows his personal commitment to really monitor authorities as well as the Turkish host communities and the Syrian refugees in the Turkish provinces on the ground bordering to Syria. and really discussing with them and observing what kind of needs they have and how efficient and impactful the projects under the facilities of refugees in Turkey were or are. I would like to give a couple of opening remarks. I would like to underline that Turkey is more than a neighbor. Turkey is an indispensable partner for the European Union. It is a candidate country for EU membership and also a NATO ally. This bond between Turkey and the European Union is also strengthened by our mutual interests, and I can just name a few. Fighting the pandemic, dealing with and preventing further climate change, fighting terrorism and addressing security issues, strengthening economic cooperation, and of course, for example, last but not least, addressing migration, which is the main topic of our meeting today. Despite all of these ups and downs in our close cooperation, it has proved very beneficial for us to cooperate. But we also need a meaningful dialogue and a good cooperation. Yet the challenge of today is really to rebuild trust in EU-Turkey relationship. This is also the outcome of the European Council in December that represents a very genuine opportunity from the EU side for Turkey and also for the overall EU-Turkey relationship. The EU heads of state and government will continue the discussion about the EU's relationship with Turkey actually next week towards the end of March, again in the EUCO meeting in Brussels. But let me today concentrate on the topic of the meeting. And indeed, the first speakers raised that Turkey is today commemorating the Çanakkale-Gallipoli campaign and the battles. And this also is an opportunity for us to remember the atrocities of the First World War, which were unfortunately followed by the atrocities of the Second World War and of many conflicts that followed. And only on Monday, 15th of March 2021, we commemorated 10 years of the peaceful protests that began in Syria and were unfortunately followed by very violent repression by the regime. And this conflict in Syria is unfortunately far from over. I would like to add that on the European Union side, we really continue to demand the end of this repression by the Assad regime, and we demand the release of the detainees, and also that the Syrian regime and its allies engage meaningfully in the negotiations under the UN auspices in Geneva to implement all the goals of the Security Council resolutions 2254. Let me also underline that since the beginning of the Syrian conflict 10 years ago in 2011, it was the European Union who cooperated very closely with Turkey on the issue of the refugees. I think we would be quite hard-pressed to name any other nation around the world, maybe minus some of the Gulf nations like Qatar, who really supported Turkey in such a very broad issue. We of course recognize and we praise on any occasion we have the huge efforts Turkey is doing in hosting these largest community of refugees. And we are now speaking of about 4 million of registered refugees in Turkey. That is, of course, a huge demand for a country of about 82 million citizens. Indeed, 5 years ago, the EU and Turkey agreed on a statement, but contrary to what Metin Bey was a bit alluding to, the EU point of view is that the EU-Turkey statement remains valid and it should continue to be implemented in its all areas as a key framework for cooperation between EU and Turkey on migration. This is an engagement of mutual trust and delivery, and it requires commitment and continuous effort from both sides. We think that despite challenges, the statement has produced tangible results leading to significant decrease of the loss of human lives and reduction of irregular crossings, and also perilous migrant journeys from Turkey to the EU. And it also ultimately improved the situation of refugees and migrants in Turkey. The EU is delivering on its commitments in the statements, including the provisions of financial assistance under the Facility for Refugees in Turkey. And also the EU on the same side expects Turkey to stand by its commitments and to deliver on all elements in the statement. It includes preventing irregular departures and resuming readmission of returnees from the Greek islands. But indeed, Ayhan Bey mention the figures. So concretely, how is the EU delivering on the commitments to Turkey under the statement? For example, we have fully contracted the 6 billion euros in assistance for refugees in Turkey that we pledged. More than 100 projects have been rolled out, and they are delivering much needed support to millions of refugees in Turkey in diverse areas such as basic needs or livelihoods, healthcare, and even education. Indeed, we have also gone beyond that figure, and last year, we in addition allocated further 535 million euros in Turkey. And we have not really finished yet, because the leaders again in the European Council in December, they stated that EU is prepared to continue to support Syrian refugees and the host communities in Turkey and also in the other host countries around Syria. But as also Ayhan Bey stated, the whole statement goes beyond migration. It refers to a couple of other structural cooperation between EU and Turkey. And these are three areas. It is the visa liberalization dialogue. Secondly, the customs union. And thirdly, it is the whole accession process as such. So maybe let me state a couple of words on these three. Firstly, on the visa liberalization dialogue. In December 2013, the EU and Turkey launched the visa liberalization roadmap. And in this roadmap, there are 72 benchmarks. But there are still 6 benchmarks outstanding on the Turkish side to fulfill. And these are namely the fight against corruption, judicial cooperation in criminal matters with all member states, including Republic of Cyprus, intensified cooperation with Europol, amendments to the data protection and also anti-terror legislation, which is very sensitive in the Turkish domestic political context. And also, last but not least, its full implementation of the EU-Turkey readmission agreement, again, in all its provision, including all the EU member states. And Republic of Cyprus is a member state of the European Union. Secondly, on the customs union, which is also part of some remarks of the statement. As the European Council leaders again made very clear, the offer of a positive EU-Turkey agenda shows that we also offer that is but provided, again, it's conditions-based. It has never been no strings attached. It's condition-based, provided that Turkey shows readiness to promote a genuine partnership with the Union and its member states, and also to resolve the differences through dialogue and also accordance with international law. And it's also very important that there are currently some irregularities and trade barriers in the application and implementation of the current customs union. So many of our member states are quite adamant about smooth implementation of the current customs union before actually considering giving the Commission a new mandate for the upgraded customs union. Thirdly, the accession process as such. The EU took note or takes note all the time when the Turkish politicians state their commitment to the EU accession. But this also needs to be matched by concrete corresponding measures and reforms in line with the accession requirements from the Turkish side. The Council, as you know very well, reiterated on many occasions that the accession negotiations come to the standstill and no further chapters can be considered for opening or closing. And this is basically because this decision responds to Turkey's continuous moving farther away from EU standards, in particular regarding serious backslidings in the areas of rule of law and fundamental freedoms. And also many steps of the Turkish authorities led to the weakening of effective checks and balances in the political system. And those of you, as many of you are not following migration, but also the Turkish domestic politics proper, you know very well the most recent developments of the last hours. All these underlying facts leading to the assessments are still holding, and unfortunately, new evidence in that direction is piling up. But bearing all this in mind, we also repeatedly conveyed our serious concerns along these specific recommendations by the Commission's annual report on Turkey. And again, unfortunately, the Turkish side has been calling these recommendations and analytical assessment as null and void. So there is also not much opening on the Turkish side on having assessment of the accession process from the EU side. But at the same time, please let me stress in the concluding words that we continue encouraging Turkey to move closer to us and not away from us. And what is really needed is rebuilding trust. And there are many areas where we can cooperate together. And the EU continues to be engaged in Turkey and actually across the whole country, which is big and diverse and very interesting. And we run programs really from the east, from Van to the west in Edirne, across the whole country. We support the Turkish civil society, and their European counterparts are very much cooperating with them, like Erasmus or Jean Monnet, where some of you professors are actually Jean Monnet chairs or have been in the past. And we are still also working, and we should be working very seriously together on addressing xenophobia, Islamophobia, and other negative developments of our time. So we are really very keen on continuing cooperation with Turkey in all areas of joint interest. And there can be many, like sustainable urban development, promoting green agendas, circular economy. These are all very important priorities, and this is where we can also cooperate with local authorities and also municipalities across Turkey. So many EU politicians keep saying and underlining that the EU wishes to see a prosperous, secure, and democratic Turkey. And this is actually matched on the Turkish side by stating that Turkey's strategic goal remains to be joining the European Union. So we also, of course, pay attention to the public opinion in Turkey, and this is underlined by still more than 50% of the Turkish citizens wishing to be closer with the EU and eventually to join the EU. So maybe in concluding, I would like to again underline that there is a lot in this relationship where we can work together, but we really need to be discussing more together, understanding the obligations and commitments and analysis or the challenges on each other's side. But in these terms, it's very good that there is an ongoing communication between President Erdogan on the Turkish side and also with the EU institutions president, President Michel and President von der Leyen on the other side. And the ongoing work and a very good cooperation is there. But again, we need to sustain it. But the latest developments on the domestic political side in Turkey are not very much speaking in our favor. Thank you very much.
Sayın Horelova'ya biz de teşekkür ediyoruz değerlendirmelerinden.
Ms. HORELOVA, thank you so much for your presentation. And in this part of our program, we will have Mr. Ambassador, Mr. Ambassador Faruk KAYMAKCI, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Turkey and Director for EU Affairs. The floor is yours, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you, Mr. Gökhan and Mr. Ayhan and Mr. Metin. Thank you so much for this invitation under this title, and it's very meaningful. As Ms. Eva Horelova, thank you so much. You have given us courage, and there are many, and the accession we have from an EU delegation, and the more we believe in this, the more we hear this word, we will be continuing in the most positive direction, and this is the term where accession is much more stronger, and because there are many reforms made, it's when the reforms are made that the accession is much, that we're closer to being for accession. And Mr. Murat, Professor Murat Erdoğan, Professor Duncan, and Ms. Laura is here, Professor Kemal, and there are many distinguished names, and Ms. Laura Battaglia and Mr. Gerald Naus. I wouldn't like to get into the details Today, we're talking about and addressing the issues of the EU deal of March 18th, and it is more, it's almost like it's presented more of a migration deal by the EU part. But it only depends on where you touch the elephant, isn't it? And 80% of this deal is based on relations between EU and Turkey, and the rest is on the migration. And for the accession negotiations and the accession period for Turkey and for the cooperation between Turkey and EU is very important. And if Turkey fails to see the accession part, and if Turkey not being able to see the accession part being fulfilled or being more focused, it's not really much possible for us to cooperate more, because we're in the EU and we're in the Europe continent, and therefore EU. It's only when we do not want this membership that the EU membership can be defined as a problem. But as long as we're eager and as long as we'd like to be a member of EU membership, it's important. And you have been mentioning, and Ms. Eva has been focusing and emphasizing Cyprus. And it's not Turkey that has made Cyprus into an EU member. It is an Annan plan has been 100% supported by the EU and by Turkey and the Turkish Cypriots in Cyprus and the northern part of, and it's not us to have Cyprus as the EU member, it's not us. And you have been mentioning about this, and you have been, there's just no meaning in emphasizing the Cyprus in this, because the right to veto, not using it for ill purposes, of course, certainly this can be stated, but as long as this is not addressed properly, our relations cannot be normal. Neither does it bring some benefits in the Cyprus Island, nor does it bring any benefits for the improvement of our relations with Greece. So we need to be studying at an objective level. Please recall that the Greek Cypriot administration, including Ms. Eva's country, it was only after the threat of Greece said that the other 9 countries will be vetoed. Let's not even forget, Ms. Eva, that it was Greece saying that including your country, 9 countries' membership would be vetoed. That this, I'm mentioning all these only because I'd like to emphasize how important it is for us to have an accession. And we have only had 16 chapters. If we had the 21st chapter opened, then we would not even be talking about the human rights or rule of law today. However, the strategic stance was not really displaced by the EU as it was expected by EU, and EU failed to. And Western Balkans and Turkey, there is a meaningless discrimination against Turkey, as you well know, Ms. Eva HORELOVA. And the updating of the customs union. Of course, there is a political aspect of it. Everything has a political aspect of this. And the delay on this is unfortunately because of the presidency of Malta has asked for this, but there was no progress on this. And each day there was a new topic introduced. And prior to the updating of the customs union, there are certain barriers and some certain obstacles. In fact, this comes from both sides. It's not only from Turkey's sides. It's not only the irritants from Turkey, but it's also from EU. There are these other barriers and obstacles put forth by EU. Let's all together remove these. Maybe this can be the first article of the deal because the Turkish drivers, the Turkish trucks, Turkish businessmen, there are business people, they're suffering from this discrimination. And the competitiveness should be at equal conditions, and these should be emphasized. And this will not be any benefit to both parties. I would like to mention about the visa liberalization. And there are these criteria, and Turkey is supposed to fulfill these criteria, but we're expecting some. Turkey is not Luxembourg. We're expecting some understanding and support. Unfortunately, we're surrounded by countries where conflicts are taking. And also, we'd like to be motivated a little. And if somebody stands up and says, we do not wish to liberalization with Turkey anymore, this does not really constitute a good message. So, but I trust my country. I have my full trust. And we have Turkey that does not have the illegal migration. And as you know, visa liberalization was to be also brought to an earlier date. And we wanted it to have it in October, but then you have mentioned about July as the month, and this is certainly possible. It's really possible to have a country. I know there are the number of the refugees and the number of the migrants. And the irregular migration has created some worries. However, these are not that intimidating numbers. This is not something that cannot be solved as long as the spirit of cooperation and bilateral trust is rebuilt. And for the benchmark for the visa liberation, and you have mentioned about Cyprus, Republic of Cyprus, and 5 EU countries do not even recognize Kosovo. And the EU is now about to remove the condition of visa condition for Kosovo. So if there's really a will, then it can be possible. So it's really not very encouraging for us if it is considered as a barrier. And there's a point where we can say if the EU in the summits there were these outcomes as not to really or limit the communication, then we need to, if the EU fails to talk about Syria or terrorism or fight against terrorism in the next 2 to 3 years, then this will not really bring good results. And the high-level meetings or the summits with Turkey, with many different topics such as energy or transportation and security and other topics should be covered, and it will be very beneficial if high-level summits will cover all these. And we have mentioned about visa liberalization. And another point is the very sincere cooperation combat against terrorism, because the Turkish person out there in the street perceives all the other EU member country citizens as the Turkish people out there on the street views the EU member country citizens at a point where they support PKK terrorist organization. It should not be limited down to Daesh. It is a terrorist organization against which we all fight against shoulder to shoulder. So should PG and PYD and this is a date as the March 18th, and it should be, although these were written, and fight against FETÖ should be also be just as strong as our fight against Daesh. And as last but not limited, not least, I understand that all the other, we have professors working on migration. I think these will be also, they will be mentioning about much more detailed points on migration-related issues. I have added the points in Article 6. There are 4 commitments given by EU, and there are 2 commitments stated by Turkey, and these were all fulfilled. One of them is in March 20, starting as of 2016, the illegal and irregular migrants were stopped at, and 1.1 million illegal migrants were all stopped. So 1.2 million, I'm sorry. And if these preventative measures were not taken by Turkey, if these measures were not in place by Turkey effectively, all these people would have gone to EU. And we have seen high numbers of other migrants going to EU. And we have seen the percentage of success has been in terms of preventing the flow of irregular migrants to EU. The success rate was measured as at the level of 97%. Now this is down to 92. And Mr. Gerald knows this very well. This one-to-one criteria, this one-to-one topic. The NGOs and other human rights organizations and institutions may not really find this very humanitarian, but we need to take precautions, because we're not talking about 500 or 10,000 people. So we're talking about millions of migrants and refugees. It was not the best and most ideal solution, but it was the second best solution. And also one-to-one principle, Turkey kept its promise, and everyone sent back and from Greece. Turkey was ready, and Turkey has received all individuals sent back by Greece. We have accepted them. In fact, we criticize Greece that they should be sending more, because based on our calculation, the number of those who crossed is around 50,000 and 60,000, because some of these, it was wrong doing by Greece that some of them were taken to the main continent. This has sent out a wrong message, because it has sent out the message to the refugees that if they can make it to the island, they can also make it to the main continent. And let's take a look at, for instance, the further parts. There are 4 commitments made by EU on promises in terms of, and you have now listened to you're now listening to my perspective, but there are 4 pledges made by EU. One of them is one-to-one, is to take 1 Syrian refugee from Turkey. And yes, EU kept its promise and has taken 28,000 Syrians from Turkey. These would be intimidating for some other countries, but these are all the figures. And we are hosting a great deal, such high numbers of Syrians or migrants or refugees here. So 7,000 to 8,000 is not really much, because 28,000 does not really mean much for us. And the second commitment and pledge, commitment by EU, 3 plus 3 and 6 billion euro, and to be able to spend this in the most effective way. And we certainly highly appreciate this funding and this FRIT by EU. And at a much more effective way, maybe, and it should be, in order to receive a quick result, EU should be spent with the Turkish institutions at a higher level of corporations. And the cost of this is to Turkish authorities is around 40 billion euro. And the amount by the Syrians is 3.6 billion, or the calculation could be 4 billion. But what's really important for us is what along with the figure, whether it has brought some concrete benefits to the Syrians. So the EU should be able to, we need to be much more quick and acting much more quicker in terms of using and ensuring an effective use of this FRIT amount. It's really that we appreciate and certainly appreciate, and all the figures and the numbers from Turkish side should be taken into serious consideration by EU. Another point where EU voluntary humanitarian admission program was blocked by EU, and they have not even put it into use. What's important for us, and what's really important, we have created this mechanism for the deal, migration part of the deal. They shouldn't be going, the Syrians should not be going to the Greek islands quickly, because we wanted to give and convince the Syrian refugees here, if they wait long enough, or if they wait a little bit more in Turkey, they will be provided help and they would be provided some support. And this was our equation. Because the legal admission part of this was not put into action, that's why this has caused a negative message, the wrong message to thinking, oh, there is no legal way, we need to get going to the islands ourselves. That's why this needs to be taken into serious consideration as well. The fourth pledge, and that was not kept by EU at all, Article 9, and Turkey and EU countries, the joint efforts should be displayed in the northern part of Syria that's closer to, in the close proximity to Syria, Turkey. We need to create more humanitarian environment so that the Syrians can be convinced and they could return and have a safe and orderly return to the north of Syria. Not only that they have not helped us to create a safe and good environment there in the northern part of Syria, but they started blaming us invading Syria, and they have started instead. Today we see that Turkey has brought some stability and peace to the northern part of Syria, and not only the Daesh and PKK, but other terrorist organizations were removed from the geography, and around Idlib area there is a stability. UNHCR, Germany and other countries, they have started conducting and carrying out their projects. What we say is, between Turkey and EU, if we have a sound cooperation, and should not be limited to the migration, because some of the Syrians are in Syria are coming back to Turkey so that they could withdraw their back to Turkey. So the movement from Syria of the Syrians, they wanted to, for instance, 425,000 Syrians were seen to have a safe and orderly returning back to their countries, and we need to continue with joint projects to enable such safe returns back to their countries. Therefore, in Syria, we need to do something in the Syrian geography. And there's a saying, this was the point that has brought the most effective, there's an idiom, this was the last drop of water. And while we were risking the lives of our soldiers there, but we have seen that this was criticized by EU. Not only that, and we were having we were introduced embargo, and not only then then this goes to mean that 18th March deal, this was interpreted as 18th March deal was put into practice in the way that Turkey or EU wanted. So they said that President Erdogan said that I will not be keeping the Syrians within Turkey, and because we have seen that EU is interpreting the deal on the way they would like to. And von der Leyen and Michel, and they had a meeting on March 9, and they wanted to review the March 18th deal, and sometimes we have these discussions or viewpoints, exchange of viewpoints with Mr. Gerald. Sometimes he says that I should not get into the other non-migrant related migration points, but I really think that this is these are indispensable, and all the points stated in March 18th all articles are important. We do not really wish for a daily and superficial relations or some kind of an only interest-based relation. We see our future in EU, and we have a very comprehensive approach to our relations, and we'd like to see all the articles in the most comprehensive way. We do not really mean that all the chapters should be immediately open, or maybe we're not really saying that all these can be resolved overnight. We need to go stage by stage and step by step, but overall framework, it should be preserved. It's a joint statement. That means, so it should deserve what it is, a joint statement. And some of the summit outcomes, maybe we will be explaining and announcing what we will be doing with Turkey based on the outcomes of the summit. As Ms. Eva has emphasized, we are a member country. Yes, we are a complex member country, but we have some complexities, but we are a member country, as Ms. Eva has stated. And despite all these difficulties and the challenges that we have been having, migration is the strongest part of our deal, March 18th deal. Not only we have helped the Syrians and the lives being lost during the illegal crossings on the boats have been decreased, these have been prevented, and the migrant smugglers have been also arrested. High number of these smugglers have been arrested, and we want this new deal to address all the articles. And I certainly agree with Ms. Heva and all the reforms. And depending on the reforms and the speed of the reforms, we should, and the voluntary humanitarian admission, if we're waiting for this, it's a loss. And certainly it will take 2 to 3 years for the customs union to be updated. It will take, and what are we waiting for? Because we're talking about, and we, not only these, but during the post-COVID term, in the post-COVID term, the updating and upgrading of the customs union, it will be of great benefit to both sides, the visa liberalization and the increased mobility and the trade, and this will bring a lot of benefits to both sides. We're talking about Turkey, the 5th biggest, the greatest partner. So relations with Turkey is not really comparable to the relations with other countries. It will be definitely affecting in the positive or negative way. The dialogue meetings should start immediately. There shouldn't be a condition. The high-level dialogue meetings and the partnership council, these should be started, and so that they can be conducted regularly. And the cooperation is of high importance, and Turkey needs to also trust our EU member countries. And if Turkey has some concerns regarding the EU member countries for the regarding the Kurdish population. This needs to be also balanced. And Mr. Gerald knows these in details. He will be talking about these, but there are some new points to be added. What are these? One of them is within the Syria, or we need to have cooperation, and this constitutes the greatest part of it. There are the number of those Syrians that are safely returned back to Syria is around 425,000, and they expect and they hope to receive some help from us. And we do not really force anyone to return back. So it's voluntary and humanitarian, and it's a safe return. This is what we're talking about under these circumstances. And no, but we're not really pushing anyone into and back to the fire. Another point is Idlib. And around Idlib and around the area, 5.5 million Syrians. We need to do something over there as well. In Turkey, as you know, there are building some factories and clinics and schools and the most important parameter of the New Deal will be the cooperation between EU and Turkey for Syria. And we need to also focus on the east border as well. Why is this so? 500,000 people of Bengali and Pakistani migrants have also are coming through the eastern part. We're talking about higher numbers of, so non-Syrians are also coming on the eastern border. We're talking about 4.2 million of people, and it's really of crucial importance. So this new deal to be drafted will not only include Syrians, but also the non-Syrians as well. Up until so far, it has been only Syrians, so it will be focusing on Afghans and Iraqis. Aren't they refugee or enough? Don't they deserve support and help? Another point is the figures. And 6 billion euro was drafted by means of taken into 2 million Syrians, but we have 4 million Syrians or refugees right now, because EU needs to do more, and they need to EU needs to take into serious consideration the figures. It's not so if, for instance, sometimes EU can receive 1,000 if they really want, but in a legal way, we need to be able to tell the Syrian refugees or the Syrians refugees that it will be good and to their benefit if they wait where they are here in Turkey instead of trying to go to the islands. Up until so far, especially in the first phase, they wanted to continue with the NGOs that they have determined. Some of them we didn't really recognize them. Some of us did not want to talk with or work with them, sorry. And there were some illegal conduct of work. So it has delayed the process. So in the next term, we need to conduct it together. Once we say conduct together, we don't mean that we should receive the support and we should carry out the projects on ourselves. That's not what we mean. For instance, the Turkish NGOs should be involved in the process. And in the meantime, Mr. Metin has mentioned before, in the Aegean, within the deal of March 18th, it says very clearly it cannot be accepted. All this is unhumanitarian. That it's not really in the Frontex. It's not the Frontex should conduct a prosecution there, because we're talking about human lives here. So we cannot be really tolerating pushbacks at all in the Aegean Sea. So these are people, they have reached the Greek islands and they're being pushed back This is not acceptable from a humanitarian point of view. So as soon as possible, and this needs to be all addressed. For instance, safe country, concept of safe country. So whenever it is okay for Greece, they can sometimes define the country as safe. And for people that we'd like to have, then they may have somehow Greece finds the luxury to define Turkey as unsafe for particular people, for us to, with the wish for having. These are pretty much what I'd like to say. And Ms. Eva said that Turkey should not keep a distance from EU. And Ms. Eva, I'd like to give an answer to this. Honestly, standing close to EU, but we really would like to see EU to have a non-discriminatory approach. And I know you cannot really hug us in full, metaphorically speaking. I know that EU cannot hug us, but at least do not push us away. This will not really work good or work for the benefits of both parts. I know maybe EU is not able to open and welcome us in open arms or hug us in metaphorically speaking, but please let's not see EU pushing us back. What we really would like to see is in the next coming weeks, let's initiate the dialogues, the customs union and the migration topics, the topics and the concrete projects and steps should be taken under these. We'd like to see EU to take concrete steps under these. And for the accession negotiations, they should be rejuvenized, and also the combat against terrorism and for the visa liberalization. And for these topics, these should be addressed by EU in the most motivating way possible. This will be to the benefit of all parties. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Minister, for your valuable insight. And in the second part, we are moving on to the panel part. And in the panel part, we will have the coordinator from İGAM and Dr. Nihal Eminoğlu will be our moderator. She's the İGAM Academy coordinator and faculty member from Çanakkale 18 Mart University. And thank you so much for this introduction, and I'd like to extend my gratitude to our Deputy Minister for his frank statements. And since our Deputy Minister is here, maybe there are some questions, and he himself has accepted to receive some questions. Our panelists, I will be introducing them, but for instance, Howard Duncan, Gerald Snouse, Laura Batalla Adam, and Professor Murat Erdoğan. If there is any questions that you'd like to ask our Deputy Minister, we're ready to receive your questions. If there is no, is there a question? Yes. Yes. Thank you so much, Deputy Minister, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you. This has been quite satisfying content, and you have expressed in the most clear way. And what has mentioned earlier by Gerald, and for instance, he has mentioned to you, it appears that let's focus on migration, and let's try to continue on the points that we can have a progress, but in the most clear way, you have said that you cannot select it from the package. Our request is that we get closer and we cooperate closely more EU on the improvement of the Syrian situation and the situation of the improvement of the Syrian refugees. We had earlier talked about the axis shift. This was addressed earlier, an axis shift from EU. This was discussed earlier. as somebody who has had the PhD on EU studies, and I place great importance on the relations with EU and the humanitarian, and we're talking about, we're really working hard, and you have mentioned it with the Turkish words and Turkish metaphorical words that we really want you. It's not like we are keeping a distance, and sometimes we are really, Turkey can be very emotional, but starting as of 2014, our relations with EU, almost like our relations developed in a certain way as to place us in a different way, not like a country, to have equal partnership or membership, but it's almost like a neighbor that may be of some benefits to EU or to, what is your interpretation of these shift of axis? It's not only about the relations with Syria, because there's this flux of others, and all the other, the numbers and the figures is more than millions. You've mentioned about the eastern border as well. So it needs to be a total migration management, a total approach to the border management. So I'd like to hear your views on axis shift, and I'd like to thank you for your very candid presentation earlier. Thank you so much, Professor. This is very important. And regarding the cooperation on migration, we see this as a means to rejuvenalize and to liven our relations with EU. And it has started that way so that our relations can improve to accelerate the accession process as well. And 7 March 2016, also earlier in 2015, and all these summits back in March 18th, the outcomes were quite well decided. All as a result of these, Turkey managed to open 2 chapters in the 6th-month term. So, and there was the modernization of the customs union was a good decision, and it needed to be accelerated. And they have mentioned, and we have, this was a good decision. And as Ms. Eva has mentioned about this, and this was mentioned by Mr. Ayhan, in the aftermath of the heinous coup d'etat in 15th July, Turkey had to focus more on security rather than focusing on other duties. And certainly we have our own responsibility, and we were liable to also conduct and to actualize and materialize our commitments and our liabilities. So certainly, and in the last, around Cyprus, there's the
recent years, we have drilling works around the island Cyprus, and unfortunately, some steps taken by Greece and other countries. I'm sure that HORELOVA will not agree with me, but the provocative steps were taken by Greece and HKV. Until a few years ago, we didn't have such a tension in Eastern Mediterranean. And within this picture, the place of Turkey changed. Turkey became a place which is absorbing the shocks for Europe, but shouldering the loads, all of the loads. And while Turkey had more and more loads on its shoulders, Turkey increased its demands, began to remind the European Union of its responsibilities, and this reminding had been perceived or shown as a kind of threat. Many EU countries, I remember having saying Turkey is threatening us, this agreement is wrong. Turkey instrumentalized the issue of migration. If Turkey had really instrumentalized the migration, would we have had still 3.7 million people here? Would Turkey continue? There are sometimes political polemics, political tensions, which is bringing about strong expressions in either side. But when we look in general, we have 3.7 million Syrians in Turkey, 500,000 Asian people are in Turkey from the other countries of Asia. But of course, Turkey is close to the conflict region, considering Syria, Iraq, to a certain extent, Iran and Libya. And this means a kind of problem with regards to Turkey's perception. But I think the cooperation on migration will revive the spirit of 18th of March. This is indispensable. Yes, we are going through a period where we don't have enough level of movements, not only migrants, but also we cannot move enough. We cannot have enough level of circulation because of pandemic, and immigrants cannot move either. But this pandemic creates huge unemployment and social problems, which we will not be able to cope with in upcoming 5 or 6 years. And it is preparing the ground for internal conflicts in Iran, Iraq, Syria, maybe Caucasia, Africa. So maybe the illegal or irregular migration will be even more than 2014. So we cannot look at the issue of migration considering the election in the Netherlands or in France. Macron is introducing a new law, so we shouldn't take new steps forward. No, all European countries should act together in order to manage this process together. Otherwise, we cannot resolve this problem. If we can manage this process altogether, I think we will have more and more cooperation in other areas too. And about segregation, not only or extrication in general. Turkey, all steps of Turkey is being blocked by Greece and Cyprus. Why we are suggesting 6 points of cooperation? We are not asking for a favor. We are asking for a return to normal. We want the normal, which will be favoring both parties. Thank you very much for your answers. Yes, Metin, Professor Metin, you'd like to ask something? Thank you very much, Dr. Nihal, for leaving floor to me. And thank you very much, distinguished minister, for your comprehensive explanations. And you had shared Turkey's perspective, and Eva also shared EU's perspective. I have 2 questions, very short. In your speech, distinguished minister, you referred to Idlib, and you said that we have a certain level of cooperation with Germany and with UN. Could you elaborate on this? Is it related to financial aids or other aids, distribution of aids materials? Could you please share? And 24th chapter, which is a very critical chapter. And in the picture which you have drawn, we don't have chapters being opened, but especially 24th chapter is very important because it has to do with the issue of take refuge. If this chapter would be opened, what is the level of Turkey's preparedness for this chapter? Thank you very much. I think there's a misunderstanding for the first question because Germany and UNHCR are not working with us. They are working together. Germany and UNHCR are working together. But we wanted to do together as Turkey and EU because in Idlib and surroundings, we are building 42,000 houses made of briquette, which means that it is healthier, and it is more resilient to winter and summer conditions. And I think so far, more than 100,000 had been completed by Turkey. Turkey wanted EU to be a part of this project, but EU didn't want to do this. Germany wanted to be a party with a bilateral relation, but Germany couldn't do this either. And then Germany and UNHCR are cooperating and running a similar project, reinforced fence, reinforced tents, they call it. I think they will have around 6,000 of them, and 1,400 had been already built, and Germany is doing this together with UNHCR. But as Turkey, we are very strong in the region. We have AFAD, we have Red Crescent. AFAD is Turkey's disaster management authority. Electricity, roads, water. Let's cooperate on all these areas with EU. As EU, Halkbank or another Turkish bank, if it would be in the northern part of the region, many Syrians would not have been obliged to come to Turkey in order to take the money given by EU. And facility for refugees in Turkey. The EU is always reminding this. This is facility. They are reminding us of the letter F, but this is not a correct approach because this doesn't resolve our problem. If we can take more steps forward, we maybe can alleviate the wave of migration, and maybe we will be able to contribute to the political problem in Syria. We cannot find a solution to Syria's problem by evacuating Syria. And 24th and 25th chapters, yes, important points. Turkey, with regards to migration and with regards to refugee and asylum and internal affairs too, I think Turkey had a great experience in recent year. When I was abroad for having my studies, I couldn't understand why they have a Ministry of Asylum, for example. And now we know it. And DG of Migration and Ministry of Internal Affairs has a very widespread legislation. If we can cooperate even more with our European partners, especially with EU, we can accelerate the works which we are doing. The criteria about opening or closing chapters can be on paper, but what's important is practice. Turkey can do this, for example, have been implemented by EU, and if we would be implementing this program with its all points, we could start readmission. Until a certain date, we worked, we operated the readmission agreements with Bulgaria and with Greece. Now we have experience, we have infrastructure, we have human material, human resource, and this can be a very deep cooperation between Turkey and EU. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Any other panelists who want to direct a question? I think the distinguished minister will stay with us for another 5 or 10 minutes. Yes, I can ask a question. Thank you very much. And Mr. HORELOVA. And my question would be, the EU prepared a migration strategy in recent months. How EU sees role of to Ms. HORELOVA, if she wants to make a comment on this, to externalize this process. There is a pressure of migration, and do they consider to continue a mechanism to alleviate the migration pressure in the borders, or will they have some new and innovative approach, and where they see Turkey within the framework of this wide strategy of migration?
Eva, would you like to start?
Yeah, hello. I can say a couple of words. It's indeed a new migration strategy proposed by the European Commission, and now it will have to be discussed by the member states and the European Council. So we also need to see how it all will develop. But it's a very broad migration strategy. So there is, to my knowledge, no special role for any enlargement candidate countries or any, specific countries as such among the third countries. But it considers all the countries which produce migration, so to say, who are sources for the migration. So it's a very general.
Teşekkürler.
Thank you. From our perspective too, we have looked at this chapter of migration and asylum, and actually we wanted to contribute to this part too, but unfortunately we couldn't have an exchange with regards to migration, so I think we couldn't provide much contribution, and even if we had given it, it would not have been easy because there are very serious level of disagreement among the countries, because some countries think to subcontract, to outsource, to externalize this in general, and they think that EU can just resolve this issue from outside, but this will not bring to us anywhere. And also about the Lisbon agreement, we don't have an agreement consonance with regards to this. There will be a dislocation within the EU countries. Still, we are waiting the responses for these questions. So we don't have a very clear panorama. But looking from Turkey's perspective, we would like to see a more humanitarian chapter on migration and asylum, because it is too mathematical now. Rather than looking from a humanitarian perspective, it is more focused on prevention of illegal migration. About the countries of origin or countries of source, yes, Europe is emphasizing its importance, but not providing any recommendations related to how to resolve this, because there are references to migration countries, but we don't have concrete steps specified. And also, of course, within EU and within the member countries, we will see what will they be doing, because unfortunately, still it's making it up as you go along. As we were reminded, there are elections in different countries, and this issue is always on the agenda. But we have to cooperate, we have to work together in order to resolve this. Thank you very much, distinguished Minister. Kemal, Professor Kemal has a question. Hello everyone, and sorry for coming late. The time zone differences a bit confused me. And distinguished Ambassador, I'm really happy to see you here after a long while. And I have a very short question in continuation to what Murat has asked. And I sure referred to 24th and 25th chapters. It's still morning here, that's why I'm confusing. And in 24th chapter, there is an issue of abolishing geographical limitation. For a long time, I had advocated for restrictions or limitations. I wonder, is there a discussion to abolish it, to replace it? Are there new ideas? And also, there are constructions made by Turkey, like schools, bakeries, and hospitals. But while listening to you, I inadvertently remembered a word of Sadako Ogata when he was heading UNHCR, because there is a great dilemma there, encountered by UNHCR in order to protect the civil people from the Serbian cannonballs. They were evacuated, and this actually ended up UN's being an instrument for ethnic cleansing. I remember this dilemma very vividly, and this was really affecting him. And I understand very well the rationale behind Turkey's efforts, and I have an empathy too. But while all these were being done, there are very important actors there. Russia, Iran. Is there a dialogue with these countries too, in order to continue this process in a more stable process? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Kemal Kirişçi. We're very happy to have you here, and I'm very happy to see you. Thank you for your cordial presence. I'd like to start with the first question. There are many different regions and areas in northern Syria, first of all, and we're talking about where their houses are. For instance, a bakery or a generator, they will remain there, and it will not cause any problem, and it will not be any change there. And it was governed and administered by the local governors, and PKK, YPG, and PYD, they're all eliminated. They're removed from the region so that their security has been increased. PKK, all the other Syrian Kurds coming to Turkey that have been been pushed by PKK and the terrorist organizations, they have safely returned back to their home. This is one of them. There are some very evacuated lands in certain settlement areas, what we call as the houses, accommodations, like some housings, because we need to be very clear and realistic on the fact that Syrian crisis is not to be resolved or completely solved in the near future. What they call as a rainforest tent is what we call as the housing. And what we do is, what we conduct over there is much more hygienic and much more resilient to the climates. And these can be used, and nothing will be lost there. So we can be using there again. So there are some, we have conducted de-escalated zones, and as a result of our talks with Russia and others. And there are some observatory towers as well. And 2.5 million people, and their arrival and their getting close to the Turkish Syria was also prevented. De-escalated areas were conducted, and they were created, and we're working closely with UNHCR and Russia and other UN agencies. As you know, the only entrance is from Cilve Gözü point, and in July hopefully there will be some of the Security Council members. The case, we hope, and we're in close cooperation with Russia, the UN agencies, so that we can preserve the stability. And Mr. Metin has mentioned about the geographic limitation, which is a very sensitive topic, but we need to be realistic here. And yes, certainly there is an ideal situation defined in the international law or in the international practice. However, there are some realities on the ground. And if Turkey is to receive 150 or 200,000 migrants annually, that would not be a problem. However, the figures is much more higher. It's around 3.5 million. And if we add 5,000, add the others coming from the eastern border as well, it's then, yes, we can give them the status that of a migrant, and if we can give them the statuses, then it may not be manageable. If we had opened the chapters of 24 or 5th chapter, then if we had, for instance, close cooperation, and if we were able to have close cooperation in Syria and Iraq, then we would not be having these problems right now. And Turkey has the strong will to take the necessary steps, but the infrastructure for these steps need to be established firmly first. The figures, the numbers should be taken into consideration, serious consideration, just as it may not look very humanitarian to have the March 18th deal word by word, but we need to also emphasize that many lives have been saved, and we were able to help many other theoretically doable. However, the migration deal needs to be drafted and prepared and made now. We should not wait till another crisis, another wave and influx of migration to outbreak. So while we are able to manage it properly at the moment, it's better to take the action and to draft and prepare the deal right now, because in the post of pandemic, maybe if presuming that pandemic will last, maybe we may not even be able to produce the equations or solutions in the most quick way possible once the pandemic comes to an end. I'd like to extend my gratitude to Professor Kemal and to Mr. Ambassador KAYMAKCI, and we wouldn't like to take further time of yours, Mr. Deputy Minister. As you have also stated, the deal focuses 80% on the relations, but also on the migration. But we have been focusing on the migration aspect of the deal, but it's almost like the major parts, for instance, have been a bit in the background. And within the migration, we focused on the financial and budget-related figures. And at the end of this 5-year, for instance, the visa liberalization and the customs union modernization acceleration, we know that we see, and based on what your what you're saying, that EU has not been meeting the expectations of Turkey. All these chapters, it's not the chapters of today, and in the long term, Turkey has been voicing these requests to EU, and Turkey says that these have not been met. And in 2016, we have drafted these deal, and all these deadlock or impasse points, is it optimistic approach? And was it very, while we were signing this 2016, 18th March, were we very optimistic as Turkey? And because if we're going to talk about the New Deal, we need to be having a holistic approach and the entirety of the relations of EU and Turkey relations. Maybe Turkey needs to go into profound details with her requests. Would it be, do you think, a much more appropriate approach to have them all specific, and do you think separately they should be addressed? Thank you. Yes, this would be a good approach, but this needs to be decided by EU to have all the topics separately. The reason why we are in a hurry, why we are trying to remind all these topics that are covered in the March 18th deal is because that we feel the need to remind these. We know that these are open to discussions, but we'd like this to cover all of the areas of cooperation. In 2016, beginning, so starting as of that very date till 16 July 2016, we've covered a very good distance, and there were very important developments. And in the post-military coup attempt by FETÖ, there were certain, some specific failure to focus on the other points. But it's not only the migration or migration-related crisis, because Turkey's membership and Turkey's significance and importance for EU and for the rest of EU, because in 2013 and in the end of 2015, we were not able to open any chapters. And Turkey has understood also how important it is to become an EU member. And starting as of March 18th, that's why Turkey wanted to open a new page. Can we do that today, have a new page and start with a white page? Yes, it's doable. Gerald disagrees with me that he says that EU may not really get into a comprehensive relation. However, we're not really going to get into a daily relationship or ad hoc relations with EU, because it's high time for EU to have a visionary and long-term relation with Turkey. For instance, the southern administration of Greek Cyprus and all the other topics. Maybe EU can try and see the distance between EU and Turkey, and going in this direction, it will put a distance between EU and Turkey, but this will not bring benefits, and it's not going to be, but what's important for us is to have and to see the positive agenda right now. And in September, summit, instead of the sanctions, there were other directions taken by the EU as well. So step by step, if EU is ready to take the actions, then these are all doable, and it's possible to succeed. Again, I need to state that I'm not in favor, and we're not asking that all these need to be completed overnight, or the visa liberalization, or all the other customs union. And of course, these will take time, but the details of the migration, a new migration deal, so that it will serve to the maximum benefits of the Syrians is achieved. But the other points can be other areas of topics, and the framework can be determined again. But we need to get to the win-win part. Thank you so much for listening, and I need to be excused. And thank you. My colleagues will be taking down notes. I'm asking you to excuse myself. Esteemed Minister, thank you so much for your words and sentences. After we wish farewell to our Deputy Minister, we can move on to our panelists. Now we will be talking about, we will be having a dynamic panel. And first of all, I'd like to begin by introducing our panelists, and in fact, not panelists, but they are guests, because if it were not for COVID-19, we would be face-to-face, and in Ankara or in Istanbul, we would be guesting. So let's have this noted so that we can host you here soon. And from Canada, we have Professor Howard Duncan from Carleton University International, and he has been international. He's been the editor for the international migration. Also, there's the Metropolis network. He has been the head of them, and he's been the chair of this. And he has been mentioning about, and he's been focusing on the migration. And we wanted to have a global approach to migration management. Therefore, we're very honored to have Professor Howard Duncan. And we're very much honored also to have Mr. Gerald Naus he's the founding chairperson of European Stability Initiative. And for the integration and the EU foreign policy, these have been the topic that he has focused. And this is a think tank to produce all these. And all the deal and his initiative and himself, we cannot emphasize how much Mr. Gerald Naus and his initiative has contributed to this deal. So he's invaluable. And ÇORABATIR Adam, and she's the Secretary General of EU-Turkey Forum, which is an important initiative. And high-level representatives from EU and Turkey are in this forum, and during the political developments being discussed at this platform. And ÇORABATIR Adam really knows Turkey closely, and therefore she's a very valuable name to have in this panel, and our host. And on behalf of İKV, Economic Development Foundation, and also İGAM Academy, and another name, Professor Kemal Kirişçi. He will be joining us from US, and he is a senior expert from Brookings Institution, and he's very modest, but I'd like to also mention how important and significant he is too, and he has been very kind as to, he was offered to be the co-founder, and and I'd like to also extend my gratitude to him for his very modest approach, and he wanted to be the deputy head for İGAM Academy. And another name from İKV, General Secretary, and she's a General Secretary of Economic Development Foundation, and Associate Professor Çiğdem Naz, and Professor Dr. Murat Erdoğan from İGAM Academy President, and he's been focusing on migration and diaspora for long years. And he's one of the most prominent names when we speak about Syrian refugees, and he has conducted most reliable researches on the ground. This is such spectacular names and a magnificent group of names, and I'm very proud to be the moderator for this very rich panel. And first of all, let's try to see the bigger picture. Therefore, at the global level, how can it be mentioned and how could it be addressed? Therefore, we'd like to give the floor to Professor Duncan first. First of all, we'd like to ask him this question. What is your assessment on the international community? Where is yours, sir? Mr. Duncan?
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and I appreciate the invitation. I'm going to be looking at this from across the ocean, and the remarks that I'll make are not intended to get involved into the intense discussions between the EU and Turkey that we've just heard. And I certainly don't want in my remarks to indicate any lack of appreciation for what has been done on behalf of the refugees by any organization. So I'm going to take a very far step back and look at things in a sense from the point of view of international relations and international relations theory. Now, when I think of myself living in North America back in 2015, 2016, and was watching the exodus of people from Syria and other countries and heading towards Europe, I have to say that my reaction was one of astonishment and dismay at the apparent inability of the international community to respond to this flow of migrants. We had, I think, a clear demonstration that the international community is simply unprepared to manage these kinds of migration and refugee crises. And I would argue that that the international community remains ill-prepared to deal with these kinds of mass migration flows. Now, in part, I think what we were looking at, in addition to when I use the term international community, I'm talking about institutions such as those associated with the United Nations. But when you also look at what went on between some of the member states of the European Union, there seemed, at least from a North American point of view, to be an unwillingness, or perhaps it was simply an inability to cooperate in order to manage the number of people who were coming into Europe. And the way I look at this very, very broadly is as yet another indication of many that the international world order that was created after the Second World War is less effective now than it once was. And there is perhaps less commitment on the part of member states of the United Nations to support the international liberal order that has been guiding us for the last 70 or so years. Now, the failure to manage the refugee crisis well in 2015, 2016 was no surprise to me, because for the last 25 years, we'd been watching the inability of any institutions to grapple with the migration flows in the Mediterranean region. And these flows had been going on for a very long time, often discussed in terms of mixed migration flows, that is to say, a mixture of economic migrants and asylum seekers and refugees. And this problem has not yet been managed to anybody's satisfaction. And I think that there's two basic things going on here. One, we know that the demand for entry into richer countries is very much higher than the supply of visas that have been made available to people who wish to migrate. And we know that the number of people who would strongly entertain migration in the world numbers over 1 billion people. We know this from public opinion surveys done by firms like Gallup. And there is absolutely no way in the world that there's going to be 1 billion visas offered. That's one problem. Simply the economic disparities in the world and the demographic disparities that the world now has are going to continue to produce strong demand to migrate. And then, of course, we have conflict that we cannot predict with specificity, but I think we can predict it will continue. So what we also saw were limitations within the European Union. And I'm not going to point to any specific country, but the Union itself seemed to be unprepared to deal with a migration flow of the magnitude that we saw in 2015. And what we saw were many member states retreating into a nationalist posture, with some exceptions. I mean, once things became very, very hot, of course, we had the unilateral actions of Germany and a few other European countries to admit sizable numbers of migrants. But these, from what I understand, at least from my side of the Atlantic Ocean, were unilateral decisions as opposed to decisions of the European Union as a body, as a unit. And so we had this inability of the EU to grapple with it. We had the inability of the United Nations to grapple with this and its agencies, including the International Organization for Migration, for which I have enormous respect, but it wasn't able to was unable to manage the Arab Spring and the emerging violence in Syria before it exploded into a civil war. So Nihal, you've asked me to be very brief in my answers. So the last thing I'll say is simply that the issues raised by this migration crisis are bigger than the migration crisis itself. It seems to me that what we're witnessing here is a diminished confidence in the international world order and a diminished confidence, or perhaps simply ability, for states to cooperate on emergency situations. And if we look at this from the point of view of international relations theory, the pessimistic realists right now have got it all over the liberal idealists. And this is a situation, I think, to be lamented.
Profesör Duncan, çok teşekkür ediyorum. Evet, bütün panelistlerimizden mümkünse cevaplarını daha nokta atışı istemiştik. Çok daha dinamik bir toplantı yapalım. Bu güzel giriş için teşekkür ederim. Şunu da ama ilave edip sormak isterim. Hazırlıksız yakalanan...
Sir Duncan, thank you so much. All the capacity, in terms of their capacity, how could they be effective? This is certainly debatable, but you know, the impact of global compacts, and because there's this migration deal. So while we're discussing this unpreparedness, and while we're discussing all these initiatives, compacts on the challenges of migration and refugee phenomenon.
Well, thank you for that question. Of course, the Global Compact for Safe, Regular, and Orderly Migration and the Global Compact on Refugees arose directly as a result of this migration crisis, the 2015-2016 migration crisis. And in my view, the declaration of the New York Declaration of September 2016 was a tacit admission that the international community was unprepared, was ill-equipped to manage these sorts of situations. And so the UN convened extraordinary meetings in order to create a process to try to develop solutions, durable solutions, long-lasting solutions for future crises, because everyone knows there are going to be future crises. Now, the system was simply overwhelmed back then. And so the global compacts, to a certain extent, were designed to create conditions under which the international system would take place. Now, so we do have the two global compacts that were signed at the end of 2018, and the question is what difference they are going to make. Now, I'm sorry to be so pessimistic, but I don't see a lot happening as a result of what in other ways was a very significant accomplishment by the United Nations. The United Nations had not really participated in the migration discussions in a significant way until then. Member states had, of course, and we did have things like the high-level dialogue, but until the global compacts, the UN had in fact tried to avoid getting involved in the migration debate because there was simply little common ground between countries of the global north and countries of the global south. But as a result of the weakness, if this is my interpretation, as a result of the weakness of the international order as we now see it, there was absolutely no hope that these global compacts were going to, as has been made clear by many people, and is abundantly clear in the texts of these compacts themselves, these are not legally binding. And so, and quite frankly, had the UN tried to create a legally binding agreement, that effort would have been doomed to fail. There was absolutely no way in the world that they were going to get anything legally binding out of these discussions. So the global compacts, as they now stand, do not require any change on the part of any of the signatory states. So the question then becomes, do they offer guidance? Do they have contents that are going to help us deal with future emergencies, migration or refugee emergencies? And to me, the signs are not yet encouraging. Since the documents were developed, we've seen crises emerge in Venezuela. We've got the current crisis with Yemen. We've got serious problems in Myanmar and problems, migration problems elsewhere. And when I hear people talking about how we deal with these current problems, and of course the Syrian question remains problematic. We certainly don't have a solution there. When I hear people talking about how we're going to deal with these, I almost never hear references made to the global compacts. Even when I hear speeches or read speeches delivered by the head of the United Nations, the head of the IOM, the head of the UNHCR, it's so rare to hear the global compacts invoked. So this doesn't inspire confidence in me, at least, that the compacts are actually going to be of much help in managing future migration crises. Now, why is it that so little attention seems to be paid to these documents after so much fanfare, after so much work went into them? Well, I'm not in government, so it's difficult for me to say why they're given so little attention. But the emphasis of both of them is to respect the human rights of migrants and refugees. And you can see why the United Nations would put an emphasis on this, because at least we do have international law with respect to human rights. And of course, migrants are accorded the full human rights that anybody else would have. But essentially all that we have in these documents, now there are details, but in the most general terms, what the compacts do is encourage states to respect the human rights, take actions to support the human rights of migrants and refugees, and to encourage international cooperation. But what we don't have are mechanisms for this kind of international cooperation. We don't have mechanisms for action, and we don't have any significant accountability mechanisms. So apart from having periodic reports of progress in implementing the global compacts, but we don't have anything in the international system to, let's say, punish states whose behaviors don't comply with the compacts. So my feeling in general is that the compacts were a missed opportunity, but I understand why they were missed, because of the diminished confidence around the world in the international order.
Professor Duncan, çok teşekkür ediyorum.
Thank you very much, Professor Duncan. Yes. While discussing the effectiveness of international community in migration issues, of course, imply all these problems which you have accounted for. We don't, the necessity of preparing legally binding documents which have a characteristic of being a norm. But if they are not binding, then their applicability and effectiveness are falling under question. Yes, this issue was discussed a lot, and in the beginning of this meeting, we have seen that at least Howard Duncan has a more hopeful or more optimistic approach. Let's see if there is any hope with regards to the EU side about EU deal. We have Gerard Klaus and Laura Batalha Adam. First, I'd like to ask to Gerard Knaus, in the 5th year of the deal. We are always speaking about their applicability, but as we have asked to Mr. KAYMAKCI, when we look at the deal text itself and discuss the expectations from the EU side and the Turkey side, are they written, are they put into right in a realistic way, or were they too utopian? Were they too utopic? Because when we open the deal again to discussion, either side can reinterpret the existing situation of the deal. Could you please share your evaluations based on the text of the deal?
Well, let me start perhaps. Can I start with showing you one slide? I would like to just share one slide with some facts. 1 second. I'll see if this works. 1 second. Okay, do you, oh, wait.
No, not yet.
Not yet. So, do you see that?
No, I can't see right now, but I don't know if you all see or not.
Does anybody see the slides? This is just a table of arrivals from Turkey to Greece per month. You see it?
No, we see something completely different to do with scheduling.
Yok, bütünüyle farklı görüyoruz.
Okay, you know what? I make it without slides.
Öyleyse ben farklı.
All right, so if we look at the last 6 years, we discovered 2 key moments at which something really changed in the Aegean. 2 moments when there was a real fall, a real drop, a dramatic drop in the number of arrivals. One, of course, was March 2016. That was based on a proposal by Turkey. You know, the Turkish government went to the European Union and said, here is what we propose. It was accepted, and we can talk in a second about what was agreed. But why is the second one even more important? Because the second big drop in arrivals was in March 2020. In the 12 months before March 2020, 62,000 people arrived on the Greek islands. In the 12 months after March 2020, it was 2,800. It was the lowest number in the last year, the lowest number of arrivals, irregular arrivals, in decades, according to the Greek police. What happened in March 2020? In March 2020, the EU-Turkey statement died. It's in coma. It's not applied. Turkey is not taking anyone back, and the EU has not been promising any significant additional assistance for refugees in Turkey for the next 5 years. There's nothing on the table except to continue some programs until the end of next year. So if the EU doesn't promise more money, if Turkey doesn't take anyone back, there is no statement. And yet, the EU has more control of its border than ever before. Why is that? Well, the answer is simple. Because the European Union, or those in the European Union who have been arguing for 6 years that the way to control borders is very simple. You follow Australia. You follow Israel. You follow what Trump was doing in the last 2 years. You abolish the applicable law or ignore it. You ignore the Refugee Convention and you do pushbacks, refoulement. So what we have in the European Union today, and this is fundamental for our debate, is 2 camps of countries. One group of countries that is very happy with the status quo. They say, brilliant, 1 year, less than 3,000 arrivals. We don't need to give Turkey anything. We are not dependent on Turkey. Turkey cannot blackmail us. This is working. And then there is a group of countries in the European Union that says, no, this is actually not a good solution because it's the end of the Refugee Convention in Europe. It's violating EU law. It's violating the European Convention on Human Rights. It's a devastating signal from the richest continent in the world to the rest of the world that Trump was right, that Australia was right, because Australia, of course, has been doing this for the last 8 years. Now, if we discuss today about renewing the EU-Turkey agreement, the starting point has to be, at the moment, it is dead. The question is, can we persuade some governments in the EU, and can the Turkish government engage to renew something that works again? And is this thing that will work for the next 5 years the status quo of pushbacks, of deterrence, of terrible conditions on the Greek islands, where people are treated so that they are worse off in the EU than they are in Turkey or Lebanon or Afghanistan? That is deterrence. People arrive, but then they are put in tents in the winter with no warm water for 12 months, with children, with no support, and you tell them, you stay here. How long? Well, we don't know, because we will not move you anywhere. That is the Nauru principle. That's what Australia has been doing for 7 years. So if you ask me about the details in the EU-Turkey statement, we have written about this. We will publish a new report today. We've published an outline of a proposal. I think the present status quo is lose, lose, lose. It's lose for Turkey, because Turkey is not going to get more support, and the number of refugees is not diminishing by going to Europe. It's lose for Europe, because Europe is losing its soul, and the legality. The rule of law on our borders, of the EU's borders, is not in place. And it's a big loss for the global refugee system, for refugees, because the signal to the rest of the world is, and remember, Donald Trump has been doing this in the US, there is no territorial asylum in the US now. If you arrive in the US, if you cross the border, because of, he was using the Corona provisions, you'll be pushed back to Mexico. President Biden has not yet revoked this, except for children. He has not yet revoked this, except for unaccompanied minors. I'm not sure he will revoke it. What we are facing at the moment is a battle whether the principle of territorial asylum will survive at all. Now, in this situation, and I close with this, in this situation, Turkey can play a major role. If Turkey now puts on the table a proposal and says, listen, dear European friends, there's a lot of tensions between us. There's a lot of distrust. But we put on the table a proposal for a new agreement. Here are a few things we insist on. We insist on monitoring that there will be no pushbacks. Okay, you can monitor what we do with those you send back. We're not afraid of this, because we are treating the Syrians who come back, we give them status again. But if we do this monitoring, we also need to monitor that there are no pushbacks. Secondly, we will put a demand, a number for resettlement from Turkey. As Ambassador KAYMAKCI was saying, the voluntary humanitarian admission scheme, there was no number. It was never started, really. It should start immediately. And the EU should commit, and a group of member states, to take a certain number every year from Turkey. And thirdly, there needs to be more money. Now, I know Turkey says it's not about the money, but 6 billion, yes or no, makes a difference. I mean, it makes a difference to 1.8 million Syrians who get the humanitarian aid. It makes a difference to the communities in Turkey. And at the moment, some in the EU say, we don't need to do that. And that would really be a terrible signal, because that was, with all its weaknesses, and you know the weaknesses, and they've been studied by Turkish scholars, with all of its problems, it was, in the end, an effective program. So I am hoping that Turkey will be as bold as it was 5 years ago. The Turkish diplomats and politicians put a proposal on the table, and then in the EU, we need to win. And I'm talking about those in Europe who care about refugee rights. We need to win the argument that the European Union responds positively. It is not clear it will, because right now, there are a lot in the European Union who say, Trump is right, Australia is right, Israel is right, we build fences, we push people back, it's working. And that is in fact the biggest threat to the refugee system and to the global Refugee Convention, which, as Professor Duncan was reminding us, that is legally binding. And still it's being broken on a daily basis. On its 70th anniversary, it will drown in the Aegean.
Gerald Knaus, hemen bir ilave yapıp sormak istiyorum. Türkiye yeni mutabakat...
An additional question. When Turkey discussed the new deal, and Turkey should prioritize certain points, you said, but main issue, if the main issue is control the irregular migration, but last year in this times Turkey allowed the border pass and allowed anyone who wanted to go. This was a message given to EU. But according to the numbers, we didn't have a very serious number of migration flow. But when we discuss again the deal, is EU feeling itself, quote, quote, needy to Turkey? Is it feeling that it needs Turkey, or do they think that this migration event can be controllable? And so will this message be given?
Well, I wrote a book last year in German about borders, in which I discussed one of the biggest cliches or myths in this debate. It's the cliche that migration, irregular migration, cannot be stopped. It can be stopped. It is being stopped. Why are there 3 million refugees in Turkey? Because Turkey let them in. When it decided not to let them in, it built a wall. There are now more than 3 million people in northwest Syria who can't get in. Why are there Syrian refugees in Jordan and Lebanon and not in Israel? Because Israel had soldiers there. It stopped them. Why are there no boats going to Australia since 2013? Because the Australian Navy is pushing them back. So migration can be stopped. It's easy because refugees usually are weak. No, they are in need. They are families, they are children, they are single men who, they don't have weapons. They are not an army. And if you send soldiers who are prepared to push them back, they can't cross. The trouble is that if we do that, we are denying one of the core values of post-Second World War, European and then global civilization. The Refugee Convention was a result of the experiences in the last century of what happens when you push people back everywhere. You know, when Switzerland and other European democracies were pushing back the Jews from the Third Reich that were trying to escape the Nazis, they were being pushed back. It worked. They couldn't enter Switzerland, but they were killed. So the lesson was non-refoulement. So the problem is not that you can't stop refugees. The problem is that it's a moral and political debate if you want to. And here, I think it's really a big issue for the Europeans. Are European democracies today ready to say, yes, we want to control irregular migration. We don't want 1 million people. We don't want 500. We don't want 200,000 people cross in boats wildly. But we are prepared to do something to do this in line with the Refugee Convention. So nobody's being pushed back. We have enough resources to have asylum procedures. We work with Turkey so that people have actually a perspective in Turkey. And we take a larger number of people from Turkey to Europe. Now, I think that, you know, if you look at what's happened in the last 10 years, I don't know if the world has realized this. According to UNHCR Global Trends, the number of refugees in the world, those who crossed borders into other countries, has increased from 10 million to 20 million in the last decade. Of those 10 million, 3.6 million are in Turkey. That is for the whole world. Another 1.3 million are in the rest of the European Union. 0.9 million, 900,000 are in Lebanon. Then you have more than 4 million in all of Africa, and that's it. So Turkey is actually carrying on its shoulders the Refugee Convention. Now, this is the kind of crisis that in the late 70s, when we had Vietnamese boat people leaving in large numbers from Vietnam to Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, and other countries in Southeast Asia, there was a big UN conference to say, what do we do? And people were relocated in large numbers, resettled. This is what Turkey should be asking for now. I wouldn't call for a big conference with the European Union. Forget that. Most EU countries have no interest. I would call for a conference with Germany, France, America, Canada. And on this conference, put on the agenda, what is the future of the million of refugees and displaced in Syria? What do we do the next 3 years? They will not disappear. Now, Turkey is in a good position because it has accepted a lot of people. Germany is in a good position because it has given more refugee status than any other country in the European Union, or indeed in the West, following asylum procedures. If those countries, like in 2016, can show that they can manage migration humanely, and this is why a new agreement would be useful, because it shows that you can avoid panic. You don't need pushbacks. In fact, you should outlaw them. You should evacuate the islands, close these terrible camps, put in place enough resources to make quick asylum decisions. Turkey should say from a new cutoff date, those who are now on the islands, the EU should keep, but from now on, we are prepared to take people back who are crossing with the goal that people don't cross. But in return, you need to take people in an orderly way. Now, I think all of this, and I've talked a lot with Turkish and Greek and EU and German politicians and civil servants, all of this could be agreed. And I think as in 2016, if Turkey puts it on the table, a realistic but ambitious and moral proposal to restore the rule of law in the Aegean and on the border, there is a chance. And then we in the rest of Europe can do our work. The EU itself will not agree on it because in the EU, there are a lot of governments that are very happy with the status quo.
Gerald Knaus, çok teşekkür ediyorum. Aslında belki AB ne kadarı nasıl yapabiliyor'yu tartışırken çok önemli bir şeyin altını çizdiniz. Bizim
Thank you very much, Gerald Knaus. But while discussing
what we speak of constitutionally, we want, is it really as important as it is for every EU member country? That's why it's a bit challenging for everyone to take an entirety of a joint statement. For instance, Germany and France are more prominent in EU, but now I'd like to give the floor to Laura Battaglia because she will regretfully need to get and leave. And while we're working on these, we're talking about how we know that we're in a situation where how could this be managed? We know that they're not in the same location. And this deal, we hear this very frequently. The deal, by means of signing this, EU and is EU trying to externalize these, and Turkey is trying to make it into a political deal. There is a criticism for both sides that is frequently heard. How do you evaluate this? What is your opinion? Because Turkey often complains that EU externalized this migration, and how is it seen in the discussions during the forums? What is your understanding of these?
Thank you. I was waiting for the interpretation to finish and make sure I understood the question. Thank you very much once again for the invitation to be here. Today it's a pleasure to be surrounded by friends and leading experts in this field. Your question is quite pertinent, actually. I remember back in 2016 or 15 when this was starting to be negotiated. Back at the time, our group of members of the European Parliament already warned about the risks of linking the statement to accession talks, visa liberalization, customs union, and so on and so forth. And today we're seeing the results of that because, of course, of many other domestic effects that have been taking place in Turkey during those years, but it was intended that this deal would reinvigorate EU-Turkey relations, but what has achieved is completely the contrary. There are reasons for this as well, which are at the very core of the deal itself, because it has been problematic due to its legality, its lack of legality and democratic accountability. So this is not a fully fledged international agreement, but a political declaration agreed by the two sides, and the member states from one side and Turkey on the other. And this has not prevented to have democratic scrutiny over how the deal has been implemented. And Gerald Knaus was very eloquently and passionately mentioning all the human rights abuses that this has led to. And we shouldn't forget all these negative spillover effects that the deal has had. But I think when it comes to the instrumentalization of the deal itself, I think this rests in the nature of the bargaining logic that the deal was conceived as. And this was, I mean, it was, the blame should be put on both sides. I think both sides have been instrumentalizing the deal, instrumentalizing the refugees and the migrants, and this has been clear to date. They have been Turkey, on the one hand, has been trying to extract some concessions out of this deal in exchange for hosting these millions of refugees. But the EU as well has not been fair, or at least has not been sharing equal responsibility when it comes to these huge numbers. I mean, to also refer to what Professor Duncan was saying at the moment, I always tend to say that this was never a refugee crisis. This was a refugee management crisis, which is completely a different thing. And here what we have to understand is that there has always been a lack of solidarity and willingness to politically commit. What Gerald was just saying a few minutes before, I mean, we have different blocks, two blocks of different member states who would be, some of them would be willing to take in some refugees, some others are completely against it. So this has put us in a very difficult situation in which when the deal was signed, for instance, or was agreed, it was negotiated in a crisis atmosphere, and we are no longer in that crisis atmosphere. I think last year we saw kind of an attempt to provoke another crisis in this relationship by opening the borders from Turkey to Greece, but this was not achieved. To have the start renegotiating the parameters of the deal. And we are here 1 year later. Actually, the conversations have long started. I mean, it's not that it's now that this needs to be negotiated. The problem is that there's no incentive from some member states indeed to sit down and agree on a new deal. And the problem is that there's no crisis situation, as I was saying. But at the same time, I think the problem is that the nature of this agreement is based on a very shaky foundation, in the sense that we have not realized, I mean, that I think both sides still need each other in order to control these migration flows, and this might continue in the future. So unfortunately, I think here we have very different sides of the story. And if you allow me 1 more minute, since I won't be able to contribute later on, my understanding, compared to what previously was said by Deputy Prime Minister, Minister for Foreign Affairs, Faruk KAYMAKCI, was outlining the list of demands from the Turkish side, including, and this is also in the proposal made by Gerald Knaus and SCI, to put on the table things that have not to do with migration. And I think here's where the problem lies. I mean, the fact that this deal is 80% concentrated on things that have nothing to do with migration is going to be the problem. And I think there's an understanding, or a kind of an agreement, that this will not be what a future deal could look like. I mean, I think the EU is very wary of including elements that are not related to migration. So I think for the sake of our relations with Turkey and the future of EU-Turkey relations, we need to separate these two different things. We need to talk about accession, visa liberalization, customs union, I mean, under the accession talks, or now maybe under the new positive agenda that we need to see how this will look like, and focus on reaching an agreement on migration, which is, as was already said before, which includes safeguards for human rights and also judiciary scrutiny over how the deal is being implemented. It definitely needs to be a more humane agreement on migration. But I'm afraid that when it comes to making the EU be part of this responsibility sharing exercise, it will be difficult to get them to commit more. But I think in general, this needs to be carefully done politically, because it's only, I mean, it also has to do with the foundations of our relationship with Turkey. But I'm afraid that at the moment, the two sides are very far from each other in reaching this deal.
Laura'ya çok teşekkür ediyorum ama bir sorum daha olacak o ayrılmadan. Şimdi evet yani.
Thank you so much, Laura. One more question. Yes, the EU relations should be separate than that of migration issues, but what's really prominent here is the financial help or the financial aid. There are some criticisms that EU cannot do much more or other than financial aid, which is the freight. But before Deputy Minister left, he has mentioned a few points. In fact, we're conducting some projects with our colleagues here. My question is to Laura and the technocrats and the bureaucrats and the decision makers in the EU. This budget, other than the non-budgetary issues, and is there any other points other than a budget in EU? For instance, do they really prioritize these some other corporations about some of the steps, concrete steps to be taken for the Syrian refugees, or do they prefer to remain within the limits of budgetary points? Thank you.
I think there's a political agreement on the table that these funds need to be extended according to the Council conclusions from December 2020. The problem is where the money is going to come from. As you know, this money is coming from different instruments. The EU under several instruments. I mean, it's coming from EU budget, IPA, Syria response, and some other instruments. And the other, I think I think it's 1/3 of it is coming from the member states' contributions. Now, this is going to be difficult to ask member states again to chip in money for a crisis that no longer exists according to them. So, and from the financial instruments within the European Union, at the moment, this is also quite difficult to see because we are entering a completely new budgetary phase. We have new instruments and a new MFF, multi-annual financial framework on the table. We still need to see where this money could come from. And we have a new external financial instrument called NDICI that will be soon, I mean, today was voted in the committee, in the Foreign Affairs Committee of the European Parliament, but it will be endorsed and adopted in June this year. So we have to see where this money could come from. And the discussions, as far as I'm aware, have not started. So this is still, I mean, there's a commitment that yes, I mean, this funding needs to continue going to support Syrian refugees in Turkey, but the problem is how and when. And there's another discussion about what to do with the funding. I mean, as you know, this facility for refugees has been divided in 2 tranches. The first one was more focused on rapid humanitarian response because it was the beginning of when the Syrians were, well, not when the Syrians were in Turkey. I mean, they had been there already for 5 or 6 years when the money was coming, but still it was more addressed to the basic needs and humanitarian needs of refugees, while the second tranche was more focused on long-term integration perspectives. So now I would say with this third phase, there's a big question that both Turkey and primarily Turkey needs to respond, which is what should be the focus of this money? Because these refugees have been in Turkey by now, some of them already 10 years, some others 5 to 7 years, and it's quite clear that they are here to stay. So this realization needs to be made in Turkey as well. I mean, there are efforts being done. I mean, there are different programs to integrate them in the education system, to integrate them in the labor market system, to integrate them in other state systems where Turkish citizens are also part of. But at the same time, the official narrative is that they will return to Syria, while this, from the EU side, it's not realistic because of the current conditions in Syria. So there's this dilemma and this axis between humanitarian and more development aid that would go into those refugees, where the discussions will look into, and the phasing out of this facility, even if money continues to come. By the way, we don't know whether this will be done through another facility or this will be done through a completely new instrument. But at some point, maybe, I mean, this support will continue, will stop going into Turkey. Although, I mean, in conversations with EU officials, I mean, they told me that, for instance, support to Palestinian refugees or support to other vulnerable communities have continued for years. I mean, over 30 years, they were supported by the EU. But we have to put ourselves in the situation in which, at some point, Turkey will need to deal directly with this this community of Syrian refugees that by then, I mean, they will already be, I mean, we don't know at some point whether they will be citizens of Turkey or not. So I think this is a discussion that needs to be, that needs to start if it has not started in Turkey, so that there's a clear understanding of how can the EU support better as well. But I think the focus needs to be completely on phasing out slowly, but also empowering the state institutions in Turkey to continue managing and directly providing this support to the Syrian refugees in the future. But this requires as well, it's a very politically sensitive discussion, I believe, in Turkey at the moment, but this needs to be realized somehow, and a plan needs to be put in place so that the EU can support in a more targeted way.
Okay, and also maybe it's missed in the translation, the first stage of my question. What about the cooperation of Turkey and EU together for the future of the Syria? I mean, there's a prioritized agenda in on EU side as Turkey expects, or not?
I understood cooperation for Syrians, sorry.
No, cooperation for the future of the Syria, stabilization of the Syria.
Well, this was already one of the points in the original statement. I believe it was point 9, to cooperate on the humanitarian situation in Syria. I believe this continues to be a priority for both sides, but when it comes to some of the demands that Turkey has that were already presented today by Mr. KAYMAKCI very clearly about cooperating in northern Syria, under the controlled areas by Turkey, I don't think this is at the moment possible. Politically, it's not realistic. I don't think this is, politically it's very complicated, but there might, other ways might be found in which both sides could cooperate. I think what it's a priority is like ensuring humanitarian corridors so that the people in need can be supported. But I think at the political level, I mean, if you remember, there were already the reaction of the EU when the military operations of Turkey took place in Syria last year. I mean, the response from the European Commission was quite harsh, and the European Parliament even hinted at suspending the customs union, not the modernization, the customs union itself. So I think this requires a lot of diplomatic efforts in trying to convey, I mean, the messages from one side and the other, but I don't see an agreement on in the terms that Turkey wants it to be agreed in a future deal or agreement on this.
Thank you so much, Laura. Çok teşekkür ediyoruz Laura'ya. Onun erken ayrılması gerekiyordu. Birazdan.
Thank you so much, Laura. I know that you need to excuse yourself soon, but we'd like to thank you for your contribution. And how is the deal interpreted in Turkey, starting with the Syrians and the other refugees, and how much of a benefit did it bring to Turkey? And first of all, I'd like to begin with Professor KAYMAKCI. How do you read, how do you interpret the deal in its 5th year? Because is it going to be, for instance, would you please focus on the financial aids, or is it sufficient, or should it be more? The fact that these are more prominent in the deal, the financial means is more prioritized in the deal. Is it, how do you interpret all these? Thank you. The speakers before myself and the contributions made by the previous speakers are precious, and I will try to continue from the point that they have left from. Time is quite limited. However, I will be also making a reference to the earlier stated phrases in terms of, because they're important in the progress to be made. Professor Duncan has stated earlier that this issue, that it's starting as of the Second World War, the international community or the order has created a sort of a ditch, and they have fallen in it. And this is much more important then. And this is more important, of course. And this migration deal that has been made between EU and Turkey, and right in the middle of this also sits this failure by the international community. And Mr. Gerald and Laura has mentioned about turning it into a tool or making it into an instrument, instrumentalization. So both parties use this. And in fact, once we take a look at the history of Europe, as has been emphasized by Gerald, the domestic politics has been sort of giving the momentum to the foreign relations. In fact, it was quite scary and quite horrendous history, and this was mentioned by Gerald. And this is what we're experiencing globally. The domestic politics, political movements is continuing to trigger the international or the foreign policies. I'd like to also emphasize what Gerald has made as a comment. He has made a reference to the US's policy for the international protection, the refugee order, and we're talking about the Geneva Convention 51. Behind this was the US. So symbolically, this convention, for the continuation of this convention, US is very important. And Biden, throughout his entire election team, he has been focusing on how he will be and how he was giving the promises in order to get some votes from his Democrat constituents. He was trying to tell how he was going to make a change in these. But what has been blocked earlier by Trump, all these asylum means, he has not yet been able to actualize these. And this is one of the most highly debated and discussed topics in Washington. And I don't want to repeat what has already been said, but Mr. Gerald and Laura, they've been focusing on the dynamics within EU. Coming back to Turkey, and Turkey definitely has been under and has been shouldering a very significant burden. In fact, it's been a great observation. And Laura has stated that Turkey has been shouldering what has been left over from the 1951 convention. And I'd like to underline that today, 3.7 million Syrians and plus others, but especially the Syrians today, and that they are under protection here in Turkey. In my humble point of view, maybe there will be those of you who will cross and who will be kind of reacting to this. Despite the law on foreigners and the international protection, and it was ratified in 2013, which was a miracle, UNHCR and US and plus the 51 convention has been behind the ratification of this law back in 2013, but opening the gates and allowing the Syrians the protection or granting them the protection. The reason behind this protection being granted is, rather than the principles, it's the priority areas that are stemming from the domestic and foreign policy dynamics. You may certainly criticize me, and this needs to be, and this actually has been mentioned by Professor Murat. He will certainly be sharing with us, the figures, and those individuals focusing on this topics, in fact, they are well aware of this. They're underlining these. They have been underlining these in the articles in certain prominent newspapers. I don't want to say this, but everyone is instrumentalization using this and benefiting from this instrumentalization. And We can see this from Turkey's point of view. And Dr. Nihal, I know that I have just drifted away from the question, but speaking about FRIT, and despite all the arguments and all the other odds that the deal has brought itself, but FRIT is a success story and has, as much as Professor Duncan has stated stated his views as well, but this letter, the FRIT, and the spirit of it, the letter and the document itself, and the spirit is actually has been put in place and by FRIT, and their Syrian kids are now able to attend the Turkish education system as well. More than 680,000 Syrian kids. In fact, on BBC yesterday, I think it was, there was a documentary was displayed on BBC yesterday that displayed some of the problems that the Syrian kids are encountering in the schools. But this is at least a gate and an opportunity. In fact, this is quite a substantial success. There is this Red Crescent card, a debit card, which is also continuing. And there's the residues of the burdens and the leftovers from the 1951 convention. These are being carried out. These are carried on the shoulders. And I'd like to also emphasize that I'm very much deeply saddened by certain lack of appreciation of this. And thanks to FRIT and the UN Commission and the EU and institutions and the NGOs and our bureaucracy and our Turkish NGOs and our local administrations, between these two parties, there has emerged and it has been established a substantial level of cooperation, a joint work and a common area of work. This is a great plus, and it's an advantage for us, and there will certainly be complaints. And these are the pluses and advantages that has been brought by FRIT. And Laura has mentioned about the gap between FRIT 1 and FRIT 2, how FRIT 1 was being used for the basic needs, and the second FRIT or the second phase were more focusing on the integration. And from Turkey's point of view, and from the Turkish administrators, and from the viewpoint of the domestic politics, this is a dilemma, and it's politically, it's creating some stresses as well. But in the second part, one of the major programs, and this is also one of the most important principles of the global refugee deal. Once we take a look at the realities of the refugees in the world, the first reality is 85% of the refugees are in the emerging countries, and the second point is the low probability of the refugees to safely return back to their country is quite low, because as has been mentioned by the UN, they are finding themselves in a protracted situation, and the term is introduced by the UN, protracted. And as has been mentioned by Professor Duncan, this has been sort of almost accepted. And this reality can be turned into a source of gain. It can be turned into a advantage, maybe. Maybe these refugees can be part of the economy in also many other countries as well. For instance, all these refugees should be provided help so that they can be self-sufficient, and with the pride that they can experience of this, and they can experience the stability if their economy and their income sources can be introduced. And the second point is, and with the taxes that they can pay, they can be brought to a level where they can pay the taxes, and without diverting to criminal activities, maybe we can also win these vulnerable groups as well. And this FRIT, maybe the EU-Turkey deal does not really make it visible, but the second part of FRIT, and it's not really a huge part of it, but part of the FRIT so that they can be used. So this, for instance, they can be used for the purposes of increasing their employability, such as teaching them Turkish or increasing their employability prospects so that they can use and so that they can develop certain skills, even writing a resume skill. But within the global refugee deal, it reads that in return for, in the formal, if these refugees are introduced to the employability, or if they're employable within the country, then they can be also introduced to the global markets so that their products can be, so that the foreign trade area can be also welcoming the products by the refugees. For instance, these countries with high number of refugees can be introduced some facilities and some facilitations so that the demand for the employability of the refugees can be increased. So this is the falling, this is probably a gap in the deal. I'd like to ask Mr. Gerald to excuse me. I really highly appreciate what he's drafting, but I have not yet seen these being included in the studies that he has made. So while we're going forward with the EU, the dialogue we will construct with EU should also include these. Now, the issue here is the instrumentalization and going back to the Turkish domestic politics. And as far as I can see, maybe I'm wrong, I hope I am wrong, this demand, this request, Syria is not willing to make this request and demand. The global refugee deal, please take a look at and check it. I think it's the 70th or 71st article. It has been mentioned there that it is, and this needs to be activated, just as back in 1970, there were these people escaping from different geographies and they were being resettled. And there was a big international conference made in 1970s in order to address the similar problems back in 1970. Turkey should and can trigger an initiative as such as to have a similar global scale international initiative. But as been mentioned by Professor Duncan, and these, what has been mentioned, it should be based on the institution and the order that has been established in the post-Second World War with the multidisciplinary structure and the next phase of the FRIT to be able to, for us to be able to see FRITs and second phase of the FRIT to make it into a doable, because there is a resistance. I'm not talking about eliminating it for good, but maybe we can sort of mitigate the stiffness of this resistance, and we can somehow bring Turkey and EU sit around one table. I know that I have taken a lot of time. Thank you so much. My second
Thank you very much, Professor. Actually,
in fact, you have asked me.
You have given the answer to.
Actually, you have answered, because this was a new. You had a new article in your.
And you had an article at a job creation element. This is what you have called this,
and because you've talked about the employability, and you have talked about the
refugees, labor, and others can be seen at the moment.
And this was the article you have contributed to the journal, included these employability and how they are introduced to the system. And
incorporating the refugees to the employment market and creating self-reliance and sustainability. Yes, when we think all this, this is more reasonable. But when we look at the numbers of the refugees, and is it really easy to do this in Turkey? Is it easy to model this for Turkey? Because I know that you have an objection to this. In Turkey, when we look at the refugee groups, especially the Syrians, is it possible to ensure an employment or development in a dimension, as Professor Kemal already stated? Will the job creation element will work if we can take on board for it?
Hocamın sesini açmayı unuttum. Buyurun.
Tamam. Çok teşekkür ediyorum.
Thank you.
Onun için de kimseyi yormayı da çok istemiyorum. Çok değerli görüşler.
It's already a long time that we are together, and we have heard very valuable ideas. It was kind of accountancy of all 5 years in the past, and it really contributes. And in the beginning, Gerald made an important point, which we actually overlook. How Turkey-EU deal was possible? Who put this forward? Who suggested this? As he very kindly reminded, this was an effort of Turkish government. And then going back to Kemal, Professor Kemal, why this deal? Because we had Prime Minister Ahmet Davutoğlu when this Turkey-EU deal was signed, and he had a new leap forward for foreign politics, coming closer to EU and coming closer to US. And after a short while, he was dismissed from the office. So this deal has a very special place in Turkey-EU relations. But also we are undergoing a process where domestic policy is very effective. That is why I completely agree with Professor Kemal. While I was listening to the distinguished minister, he said that we don't want to discuss packets with the EU. We want to go forward in a total way. But I'm sure our minister is well aware of this. The new diplomacy doesn't allow this. But of course, this is a policy. How is our policy with Russia? Are we agreeing on in all issues, or are we agreeing on some issues and having conflicts in others? How is our policy with US? How is our policy with Iran? They are always package by package. Why we are going package by package with the other countries? We are pressurizing for running a total policy with EU. Going back to the question you directed with Fritz, Turkey and EU revealed that they can conduct a cooperation. They can be successful in a cooperation. But when this cooperation was isolated from the politics and just turned into a financial cooperation, this caused the internal public opinion to create a pressure on government, because this meant that we will give you money and you will keep them in Turkey. This wasn't a sustainable relation, sorry. That's why politicization of this strengthens anti-EU discourse in Turkey. We have seen this when the Greek border was opened 1 year ago. The decision of Turkish government received that support from all sectors of Turkish society, because we had this potential. Even we forgot that we suggested this deal, and we ignored some other points too. That's why internal policy is standing in a very important position here. With FRIT, what can be? There is a basic problem with FRIT, which is, thanks to European tax sphere, this is what EU says. This is the money given by EU, and we will inspect it. Because we don't trust Turkey, we will channel this to the projects which we chose and which we deem proper, and we will inspect it with our organizations. But Turkey is not a small country. Turkey should be able to identify its own needs and to take steps to this end. If you don't do this, this will be preventing the resources to be used from being used effectively. In Turkey, there are many problems with the money spent and inequalities among regions. Turkey couldn't make a central settlement planning. Everyone went where they wanted and they just settled. In only one district of Istanbul, we have 220,000 foreign nationals. But in another district of Istanbul, maybe we don't have 100. So we need local harmonization or processes. And to do this, you have to give initiative to the local, first Turkey government, then to the local governments. If there will be a new FRIT, this should be taken into account. With FRIT, the economic needs in Turkey, can we meet their needs? Not with this money, because to create jobs is not something easy. To create a job in Turkey will be around $100,000. For one job area, you need to invest $100,000, and Turkey is experiencing the highest level of unemployment in Turkey. And you are trying to alleviate something with some resources coming from the FRIT related to Syrian refugees. But we have to have long-term strategies and planning. The biggest problem with Turkish government is, from the very beginning of the crisis, to concentrate on Damascus too much, taking into account what's happening in Damascus and neglecting the refugee issue in Turkey and seeing this something temporary, something provisional. Still, we have the official discourse that the Syrians will go back. And in this case, we cannot do economic or social planning. Just we have domestic policy and foreign policy positions and relations. Turkey's EU relation is a subject topic of domestic policy of Turkey, which is a very sensitive issue, and Turkish society is very sensitive, and we are switching back between a hate-love relation. And the politicians are manipulating it very good in their terms. And let me underline what Kemal already said, and let me complete my sentence. Civil society and local government are doing extraordinary works with regards to refugees, even if they don't have resources and they don't have authority or powers to do this. And this is a great acquisition for democracy. But in order to roll this acquisition over Turkey to make this benefited by the whole Turkey, we need a transfer of central funds to local. Turkish society should be able to enjoy these funds. We are saying, yes, thanks to European taxpayer, but let's tell this, thanks to Turkish taxpayer. Politicians, but we, ordinary citizens, are shouldering the load for this. But there is a kind of perception which is downplaying this existing situation, as if we have a deposit of money somewhere, but when Europe pays it, it's always coming from the taxes, but it's also from our taxes. European can have a problem with Erdogan, with Turkish government, but each citizen in this country deserves this solidarity, and EU's policy is just igniting and fueling the anger in Turkish society. So EU should also put forward a strategy in a more relaxed way, in a more comfortable way. This will not be only a problem of Turkey. This is not a threat. We see this. We are aware of the fact that Turkey-EU relations are challenging. And let me say something more, as distinguished Minister already stated. Unfortunately, we've seen that border security of Turkey is problematic. We have entries from Afghanistan, Iraq, Pakistan, which will also create a hesitance in EU too, very naturally, because EU will not be able to easily conclude a membership agreement with such a country. You have to invest in your border security. You have to protect it better. There is a potential for transforming this into better cooperation, but it is impossible for EU to work this without carrying the discussion to the political arena. Let's go compartment by compartment, package by package, but otherwise they will not be able to resist the flow. There will be new parties coming to the fore in Turkey which are anti-refugee, and they will be shifting towards the central politics. As the head of the İGAM Academy, I'd like to thank Economical Development Foundation and ÇİDEM, distinguished minister, and all the team. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor. We are behind the schedule which we have planned. Sorry, because we are occupying their time, and I think the viewers are quite happy. But while planning this, I wanted to go faster, but it is such a high quality conversation that I don't want to interrupt this. But while all this recording will stay in YouTube, we just didn't want to cut it in the middle. Going back to Professor ÇİDEM. Actually, this is an interesting point. So-called migration deal is actually Turkey-EU deal to 80%. But in practice, we are discussing financial facilities and others. All the discussion showed that, as Faruk Bey already stated, we are handling Turkey-EU relations from a holistic perspective, but also there are some comments indicating that they are very comprehensive issues. We have to segregate them. We have to separate them from one another. What would you say about the chronic issues of Turkey-EU membership and other relations? Will it be useful for us? And what do you think about the applicability of this deal with regards to the chapters discussed in Turkey-EU relations? Thank you. I agree with Faruk completely, because it's a Turkey-EU statement actually, but we call it a Turkey-EU deal. What triggered this was, of course, migration. Yes, 80% other issues, but still migration was an important trigger, a tragedy. People coming from Syria, and EU's desire to stop this. And to remember, in 2015, July and September, actually EU tried to create a quota system in order to distribute Syrian refugees in a more equal way to the member countries. But many member countries didn't want to abide by these quotas, and even some countries held referendum about these quotas. And then Turkey progress report had been left to after elections. German Prime Minister visited over and over Turkey, and there was a great pressure. In 29th of November, there was a joint action plan. It was posted on the website even before Turkey accepted it. EU was in a kind of panic because they didn't have any other way to stop this. And also we had a humanitarian dimension, people dying in Aegean Sea. It was going out of control. And this tragedy actually triggered this statement. But on one side we had Turkey, and since Turkey had a perspective for EU, the country couldn't understand this only a kind of deal on refugees. But at the end of the day, we have a package which is also brought together with the other issues, 9 topics, and only a few of them was related to refugee and asylum, but other issues were related to customs union and other points. But especially visa freedom was the most important, or liberation of visa was the most important issue among this. When we look at to the admission deal, it was related to visa liberalization. But in this, Turkey began to create 72 criteria in a very fast way, and in April, many laws had passed by the parliament. In May, we received a positive report from the Commission, but after this, we couldn't continue this process. After 15th of July, the environment changed in Turkey. We told them that we had to, we already told that we had to carry out the remaining criteria, but we couldn't do this. As İGAM, as our foundation, we are working on Turkey-EU relations, and maybe approach of that day was kind of the issue of refugees can trigger a process of mutual learning. EU's experiences are very important for Turkey, and the Syrian situation is very important for Turkey in terms of lessons to be learned. So with the new functionalist approach, a kind of spillover effect could be seen in terms of a secure cooperation, which has reflections on other fields. But actually, what we have witnessed was just the opposite. Yes, the cooperation was working, was functioning, but the dominant discourse in Turkey was that EU didn't abide by its promises. There was a very slow flux of funds. It was just a financial cooperation. Most of the load had been shouldered by Turkey, and EU didn't share the load. And when we asked the same to EU, they always said, this is, we are providing the funds within the framework of our project rationale. They should be disseminated over a certain time frame. So a common understanding was hard to create among either parties. And we couldn't have a deal, couldn't have an agreement about the welfare of the refugees. EU focused more on how to keep migrants outside their frontiers, and Turkey wanted to use as a kind of card, a trump card in Turkey-EU relations. And the real issue, the welfare of refugees, was instrumentalized, which had a negative effect on all Turkey-EU relations. Another important point, the fact that this couldn't reflect the positive acceleration related to the relation between Turkey and EU showed us that a holistic perspective is very important. Instead of just saying, let's make cooperation in refugee point, but let's wait for its effects in the other fields. But we've seen that how important is looking from an inclusive perspective, because this showed us how important it is to have a holistic or comprehensive framework from the beginning. Despite all, still we can speak about positive agenda, including update of custom union, high-level dialogue, humanitarian contact, and migration. And it's a priority for either side. We don't have only Syrians in Turkey, we have also immigrants from other countries or irregular immigrants. That's why this issue will hold to be an important issue between Turkey and EU. But discussing a new plan, it's very important that Turkey also provide a plan for this, because this issue is interrelated with many intermingled issues. Migration is also related to climate. There are many effects coming from climate change, which is triggering the migration. And also when we speak about migration, it is also related to employment and economy. With digitalization and technological revolution, we know that unemployments have a structural nature now. It also has to do with health, as we have seen in pandemic. Maybe we can put forward any agenda which is taking them all together. Green New Deal, digitalization, migration. Maybe we need a kind of deal which touches all these points. Because we have to make these relations to overlap with the new agenda, which is important for all countries. We have two important points here. On one side, we have to take on board absolutely the refugees. We have to listen to them while drafting our plan. Yes, we are speaking with them, but sometimes we are not listening to them. And secondly, local governments are very important. They are a part of all these projects. As the professors already said, there is an important experience sharing in EU with also civil society. And we created a pool of expertise here. In this way, maybe we can create a new platform. And maybe in this way, we can take steps to ameliorate the refugees' situation and to rebuild the mutual trust.
Thank you, and you have answered. And all these, and here in the deal, the topics stated in deal certainly does not show that Turkey will be a member soon. However, it's important that the partnership and the cooperation is continuing, and the local administrations and the importance of the local administrators is important. And in fact, even the global refugee deal, this needs to be also included as well, that you have mentioned this. We will be now moving towards the end of our panel. First of all, I'd like to ask all our panelists to excuse us, especially Professor Duncan and Gerald. Professor Duncan, we'd like to ask you a question, and afterwards we'll ask another question to Mr. Gerald. Mr. Duncan, once you take a look at the entirety of it, I know that you are approaching this towards a global perspective. You're not focusing on EU and Turkey perspective, but this deal will be renewed and it will maybe shift to a new direction. The international community, international institution, do you think they can play a role in the shaping of this new deal, in the process of making this new deal? Thank you. Over.
Oh, thank you. And sorry, I had to wait for the translation to finish. To be honest with you, it seems to me that the international community is not in a very good position to involve itself in the negotiations of the deal. Now, the principles that are in international law in the form of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the Geneva Convention on Refugees, plus the two global compacts, these principles are important, and one would want to hope that these principles would be adhered to if there is a new EU-Turkey deal. My concern is that there will not be a new EU-Turkey deal, and it would not be, or perhaps it is overly cynical to look at the EU's new pact on migration and asylum as an indication that they don't expect a deal either. So they've introduced a new mechanism that we might refer to as Fortress Europe. And then you have Denmark's objective that was recently announced, that they want to reduce asylum-seeking numbers down to 0, which is an astonishing thing, especially for Denmark, because it was the very first country in the world to sign the 1951 Geneva Convention on Refugees. So what I can hope is not so much that the international community can help or guide an EU-Turkey agreement, but that it might in fact go the other way around. That if the EU and Turkey succeed, that it might give us some additional hope that multilateralism still has a place to play in the world. And if it does not, if there is no deal, that if Europe continues to retreat into a myopic nationalism, then I do fear for the international order, as I said before, and it won't be a problem of managing migration. It won't be a problem of managing a pandemic. This is, of course, another colossal failure on the part of the international community, but it could indeed be a failure to manage something that would have even much worse consequences than what we're seeing now.
Çok teşekkür ediyorum Profesör Duncan'a ve aslında Gerald Knaus'a atacağımız pasla ilgili de kendisi bir görüşte bulundu.
In fact, thank you so much. You have already stated some points, some of the things that we will be asked to Mr. Gerald. In fact, the pact, the new pact that has been signed for the asylum and migration pact, and I'd like to now try to bring this to a close. How do you, Mr. Gerald Knaus, how do you evaluate the new pact? How do you evaluate it? Where do you see Turkey within the entire pact? And how do you think this will project itself in the new Turkey-EU deal? Thank you.
Well, I would agree with Professor Duncan. The important question today is, will Turkey and the EU reach an agreement that can show that the rule of law, the Refugee Convention, and cooperation to support the biggest country that has received refugees in the world in the last few decades, Turkey, cooperation by the EU to support Turkey, can be restored or not? That is the single biggest issue that will determine if the Refugee Convention from 70 years ago survives. The EU Migration Pact will never be adopted. I just tell you this now, and I'm prepared to put money on this. It has no chance of being adopted. Why? Because it is based on the idea that the EU-Turkey agreement sort of worked. It says there will be quick processing on the islands of Malta or in Lampedusa or in southern Spain. And then there will be return of those who don't need protection, and those who do need protection will be distributed. But I've talked a lot to the Spanish politicians. I've been in Spain a lot. I know how the Maltese think. I know how the Italians think. They all say, wait, this didn't work in the Aegean. Why would we create a new Moria? Why would we put anybody in Malta or in Italy, keep them there? We can't return them. At least you had an agreement with Turkey to take people back, and you still couldn't manage it. So they're all saying this migration pact doesn't help us. Unfortunately, while NGOs are right to criticize problems in the theory of the migration pact, the reality is that if you don't have another policy, the policy they are all embracing, from Hungary to Croatia to the central Mediterranean, is the Australian policy of pushbacks. I mean, the British government, the Home Secretary is saying openly, we want 0 irregular migrants. Denmark is saying it. As we see the debate in the US, I mean, I think until the midterms, President Biden might not restore the right to claim asylum in the US. That's another 2 years. The Western world is getting used to the idea of pushing people back. It's illegal in Europe. It's against the European Fundamental Charter. It's against EU law. It's against the Refugee Convention. But where do you hear from UNHCR, which is the guardian of the convention, a single concrete idea what to do in the Aegean today? They are very present. They have a huge staff in Greece. They have a huge staff in Turkey. But proposals, what to do? None. So at the moment, to save the Refugee Convention, it relies on Ankara. I mean, it's really striking. It relies on the Turkish government taking a concrete and focused proposal, and yes, put in visa liberalization and demand things the EU can give you. Lower the visa fee by half immediately. Give more long-term visas, a good thing. There are things Europe could give you, really. I mean, we've worked on visa liberalization for a decade. I'm all in favor, but also what the politics are like in Europe. For Turkey, even if everything else remains the same, having an EU-Turkey agreement that gives Turkey aid for refugees, that stops pushbacks, that sees more resettlement, and that keeps the global system intact that Turkey needs as much as anybody else, is not only good for Turkey, it's a contribution to one of the fundamental conventions of the last century. So I don't want to be, sound too bombastic, but getting a new agreement done here with all the distrust really is a foundation, because then what you could do in Europe, and I tell you what we are trying to do. I'm talking now to European politicians. I say, Malta needs such an agreement, or the EU needs such an agreement with Tunisia. Tell the Tunisians from a cutoff date, we can return people who are safe in Tunisia. In return, we will take more refugees from Africa through resettlement. In return, we have more rescue boats to save people. We don't take them to Libya, where they are tortured, which is current EU policy, supporting Libyan coast guards to take people back to Libya, where we know people are mistreated. You can expand if it works in the Aegean. And President Biden will need something like this. If he wants to restore the right to asylum, he will need cooperation with some of the partner countries, Mexico, Central America, to take back people who come irregularly in a way that makes them safe. At the same time, to bring in more people regularly, so you decrease incentive to help countries build up asylum. I mean, he will need an EU-Turkey statement with his southern neighbors. And if we get this done, we save the Refugee Convention. If we don't get it done, if it doesn't work in the Aegean, the Refugee Convention goes the way of the League of Nations. A nice idea, but when pressure built up, when democracies were feeling in panic, they just abandon it. And that would be a tragedy.
Gerald Knaus, çok teşekkür ediyoruz bu samimi ve doğrudan açıklamalarınız için. Panelimizin de sonuna geliyoruz.
Thank you so much for these sincere explanations. Maybe 5 years later, we will go back and we will say that in the last decade, maybe 10 years later, we will go back and we will take a look back, and then we will be seeing then the more of a rights-based agreements, and maybe the protocols will be signed. But what the outcome of this webinar is that at the international level or at the EU level, we see that this is there is not really much of a sometimes not much of a promising things, but there are still things to do. I'd like to ask all our panelists to excuse us because of the delay and because we're much ahead of our time. We'd like to sincerely contribute to your positive contributions. Perhaps this will be shared in both languages, and maybe therefore we try to see it in one language. But I'd like to now, first of all, I'd like to extend my gratitude to İKV Economic Development Foundation and İGAM Academy. And as a member of İGAM Academy, I have been honored to be part of the webinars, and we'd like to also extend our gratitude to our translators. And I'd like to now give the floor to Mr. Gökhan. Thank you so much. And you have actually already extended my gratitudes as well to our minister and to the representative of EU delegation, Ms. Eva, and all the contributors, the panelists, and all the speakers today. And up until this hour, all our attendees, they've been with us. We have started quite in high number, and the program has been quite rich in content. And İGAM, the Research Center for Asylum and Migration, Mr. Mehmet, the press personnel for İKV, and the Economic Development Foundation. And we'd like to extend our gratitude and thank you so much for the translation. And they've been with us for some time, and we had not planned it this way. Certainly, we ask their tolerance and their kind tolerance. And in the next days, this webinar will be shared on YouTube in 2 languages. Our president of our foundation wanted to be present, especially in the last part and the closing part of our webinar. Regretfully, he's not here, but this is the end of our webinar, and we'd like to see you in the future in healthy days. Thank you so much.
Görüşmek üzere. İyi günler. Teşekkürler.